States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you had a nice holiday weekend. Is there any public comment from the board?
Anything? Yes, this coming Saturday is the Stillman Fair over on Lancaster Ave. I am going to be manning the volunteer booth, the town's booth. Jack Rabbit of the Conservation Commission and the Stormwater Task Force, and Matt Allison of the Planning Board, Agricultural Commission, and Stormwater Task Force are also going to be manning the booth. We'll be looking for volunteers and trying to get people interested in learning about stormwater and what we can do to manage it better. We'll have a rain barrel and a compost bin and some compost buckets. Lots of things.
Thank you.
Rubber duckies, too.
There you go.
Is there any public comment from the public? Please.
Hi, Hannah Anderson, 780 West Street. So you guys might not have heard what happened recently at the schools. Oh, I'm sorry. So I don't know if you've heard of what happened recently, the first 2 days of school with a child gone missing and then having 50 minutes before finding that child. That was my child. And so, sorry.
I'm sorry, still can't hear back.
I know, I'm sorry.
I don't think the mics are on.
Are they on?
Are the microphones on in the meeting room?
Microphones are on for the TV audience, but we've got to get them on for in here.
Okay.
Okay.
Why don't you try it again? No, just go ahead.
Can I tap it? Should I do something like that?
Just try it again.
Hannah Anderson, 780 West Street. We're good? So on the first couple days of school, there's a lot of chaos. I understand that. And there's a lot of confusion on where kids go. On the first day of school, my daughter went missing for 50 minutes. Obviously, I'm upset by that still. I reached out to Senator Tran to see what we could do for Massachusetts in general to try to put a protocol in, or laws or whatever have to be done. He said it's a local thing, and so I should come to you. So that's why I'm here. Sorry. I just don't want this to happen again to somebody else. When I told the staff at the school, of the primary school, that my daughter was missing, the buses were still there. They were still loading children, and they were taking other children that were around kindergarten age from the buses to the pickup lines. I asked for them to check the bus for my daughter. I was told to go to the stop sign so that the pickup line could keep going. That's fine. I did it. I then waited because she asked me my daughter's name. I said, Aria Anderson. She should be on pickup, but if she's gonna go a route, maybe bus 3, but I honestly don't know. Her paperwork says pickup. She said, okay, I'll look into it. I waited for 5 minutes at that stop sign. Mrs. Swenson, the music teacher, was approaching my car with a big smile, and I thought, oh great, they found my kid, they're about to tell me, like, we're all good. She asked me who am I waiting for? I had to then again tell her what I had already told somebody else that had a walkie-talkie. She just ran to the person. She had urgency. She understood my scenario. She ran. Then they casually walked back. Basically, by the time they got there, the buses had started going. Now, I don't know if my daughter was on bus 3 or on any bus or even in a bus, because they said to me, and I have it, I'm sorry. If she is on a bus, she will be dropped off at home. If you leave now, you can beat them to get there. My bus route from the school, pickup is 3:20. My kid doesn't get home till 4:10 on the bus. That's 50 minutes that I sat there not knowing what to do and wondering if I was doing the right thing by not calling the police and depending on them. Now, when I left, I would assume somebody would try to get in contact with the bus company or me and understand that I wanted to know where my kid was. That was not the case. There are new protocols put in place for this to happen again, then it hopefully won't. My issue that I'm asking for help with is, one, policies on how they write them. If you guys could step in with that a little bit. Also, that the Chief Marino would like to have a channel that his cars can tune into. He can make a channel of himself. I guess he needs to know the frequency that they use so that he can have direct contact with the buses. But there is a spot in Lunenburg that's dead. And that's one of the main problems, was that nobody, including the bus company, could get a hold of that. It took 20 minutes before the school stepped in to start looking for her on the buses. So the lack of communication and urgency between the staff itself to the other staff in the administration to go to the principal and vice versa, and all the rest of the chain that it has to go through, took too long. And I'm just asking for someone to help me. I'm also going to the school committee meeting this Thursday night, because I do think that this is where I should have started, was with them. But like I said, Senator Tran said to come to you guys, so I'm just letting you know what happened.
So she was on the bus?
She was on the bus. I didn't know until literally I saw the bus, and then I got the phone call from my husband. Nobody had ever contacted me except for him. He was the one running back between both of us, between the school and me. But do you guys have any questions, or?
Mr. Chair, I have a comment, if
Sure.
I may. We talked about this. I was at coffee with the chief, and I've done a lot with student safety and security, and then there was a real chain of custody problem in that story, because if somebody picked up someone else's child at pickup, which could have been the case, then that's like an Amber Alert situation. Right. So you've lost 50 minutes of not being able to identify where someone is. But I think I might have the name wrong. It might be called a bidirectional repeater. But the police department and fire department would like to have, and they're about $50,000 each, so it's a capital item, where then radio communication at the Lunenburg Primary School would be better. So I think that would be our role, is looking at the capital item to make the radio frequency.
And that's if there's no chance of it being free to tap in automatically through their system of making a channel. Because I know Chief Marino said that there was a chance that it could be just as simple as just making their own channel, and they can automatically go right to the buses. But it all depends on the frequencies and radios and stuff I don't know. Anything else?
We'll work with the school department to do what they need to do, and we'll do what we need to do.
Okay.
Right.
And I invite everybody, if they want to come Thursday night.
It's Wednesday.
No, it says collaborate. I got an email. So I have a meeting with the superintendent for finance tomorrow, and I planned on verifying. I got an email today saying that it's the collaborative room, 7 p.m. during open house, so to be early.
Right, on that
Parking.
Thursday?
Yeah, that they switched it, but it's not updated on the school committee website.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I can follow up with the chief and the director at dispatch as well about the channel.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Rhonda Licio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just have a comment on an agenda item, the conveyance of the land. I watched the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, and I actually came to the same conclusion that what they decided. It appeared to me that the conveyance was not exactly in line with the bylaw. And then I heard more information about the swap. And I just feel like I wish I could have known the information I know now at town meeting, because I wish I could go back, because I made a mistake in not opposing the land conveyance. And I would hope that in the future, we wouldn't propose things at town meeting that conflict with the bylaws. And I think it would be a better approach to change the bylaw, because the bylaw is actually there to protect residents. And I don't think it is in the public good. Bylaws are supposed to be in the public good, and I disagree that any of this is in the public good. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, please?
No. Okay. All right, I'm short. There we go. Kathy Mosca. I am also here to talk about this conveyance of land that has been talked about in the past. My notations. This parcel of land, which is about to be traded away, sold, or whatever, has been called unusable, worthless, and so forth by those who wish to own this land in order to obtain frontage to put in 7 instead of 5 houses. In other words, it's just for the profit. This wooded path is used currently. I live right next door to the path that comes off of the Woodlands. I see people coming out of that driveway as well as up and down Gilcrest and Valley. The people use it. It's an easy access for a short walk in the woods. It's used by cross-country skiers, dog walkers, and just casual walkers who want a short stroll in the woods. This is not unusable, it is not unused, and it is not worthless. Stating that the title of this land is to be conveyed, I think, is just a nice way of saying that this town-owned piece of property is either going to be given away, traded away, or sold in order for somebody else to make extra profit, and I don't believe that's in the best interest of the residents of Lunenburg. People outside of this neighborhood also come, park in front of my house, which is fine, and use this path, as well as the other one, which is begins with the Gallagher's driveway. But they do use this path as a short walk in the woods, so they don't have to walk up the Gallagher driveway in order to hit wooded land for their dogs and so forth to run around. This path could be easily further cleared to make it even more usable from Gilcrest Road to the Lane property, because it is access from Gilcrest to the Lane property. The Lane property includes 168 acres of town-owned wooded land. Again, it is not worthless, unusable, and it is being used by the residents of Lunenburg as we speak. I know the board has already obtained permission to make this decision in the best interest of the residents of the town of Lunenburg. However, I also know that the Board of Selectmen met behind closed doors, and who knows what went on, because that's all closed to the public. But it is my hope tonight that the Board of Selectmen will act in the best interest of the residents affected by their decision, and that they will not sell out town land to developers who simply need it to qualify for frontage for 2 additional houses going on that property. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please.
I didn't do that, did I?
Hi, my name is Evagrio Mosca, and I live at 2 Valley Road. I have a global concern tonight, but I also have several specific concerns related to the property at 161, 171 Gilcrest and the conveyance of property. My global concern has to do with the what's on the website of Lunenburg. It's the philosophy of the open government. And I became concerned that although we went to some board meetings related to this property where the board voted to deny the 7 homes based on them being on 7 non-conforming properties, and to find out that on August 7th there was an item to go into executive session. As a resident who hopes that in this little town we decided to live in, that we have open government, that we stick to the policy of open government, that when we see the words executive session, it raises red flags. It does for me, and it does to people I've talked with about this property, that it, you know, again, we don't know what goes on behind the closed doors of executive session. I came to find out that there's no requirement that there be a posting of minutes except as they pertain to any decisions that come out of executive session. But it does make me concerned that there's the opportunity for possible corruption that could happen when there isn't a public accounting of the discussion and the minutes that ensue. So that's my global concern, and maybe you could address that when it's time to address that property. In addition to what's already been said, the Harvey Lane that's in question for conveyance, I agree that it is a used property, and it's been a valued asset for about 80 years. We've only been here 6 years, but we've witnessed people coming in and out of the property. I walked it myself, and walked it the other day all the way up to the bridge. And granted, it's not exactly what you'd call a clear pathway all the way through, but it does have great value. It exists as a property of the town. It's not a byway, it's an actual owned property by the town, and I see it as an asset. A specific concern I had was if a lot of houses go in, we already have a problem that traffic coming down the street hits the midway point, and an awful lot of them are going 50 miles an hour. It's a very fast road for people who don't pay attention to speed limits. There are blind corners at every driveway because the trees and the scrub come right up to the street. And there are children who live in the neighborhood. I've got grandchildren who are at my house all the time, and they ride bicycles, they walk, they cross the street. And when these vehicles come down the road, it's pretty scary. And the thought of another 7 to 20 vehicles coming into the neighborhood, I think, presents a real serious safety concern to the neighborhood. I guess that's it. I appreciate you listening. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yes, sir. Jane Gallagher, 9 Valley Road. I was happy to see this conveyance of the property on Gilchrist Street back on the agenda this evening, giving the residents of Lunenburg a chance to speak and not have it behind closed doors. And you know, transparency in our government, I think, is really, really important. So thank you for putting it back on the agenda and allowing for public comment now. I'm a direct abutter to this property. You know, I bought my land, I built my house. If you buy land, you should be able to do as much within the laws, within the zoning that you can. But I feel as though here we're making exceptions, and I don't quite know why. I believe that the Harvey Lane is a property that's owned by the town of Lunenburg, and I think it's really important that the town of Lunenburg owns that property rather than have an easement. And the easement that's proposed is about 30 yards away from an easement that exists currently, which is on my driveway. I don't quite see what the benefit of having 2 easements running parallel to essentially the same place. They both go back to the large town forest. The Harvey Lane actually has direct access to the Lane property, which is even better than my right-of-way. I just would ask, and I hope that that you act in the best interests of the residents of the town of Lunenburg. You know, what is the worth of this property, really? You know, can we put a dollar value on it? I can, you know, I think that it's very valuable. I think that 5 houses are probably sufficient in this area. And I would just ask you to consider everything that you've heard this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, please?
Hi, Peggy Proctor, 141 Gilchrist Street. I really my comment, and I agree with what Jane Gallagher said, was that people that own land should be able to build on it as long as it meets the zoning requirements. So I'm here tonight really to look for an answer as to, the planning board had the meeting on July 28th, and as a butters, we were sent the list, you know, the notification, and also what the proposal was, which included conveyance to the abutters of X amount of square feet of land. And my assumption on that was perhaps it was because they were building more homes than they could have, and I didn't know if it had something to do with property lines. I really didn't know what it was about, and I don't want to sound ignorant, but unfortunately I couldn't go to the planning board meeting, so I looked later and saw that they had voted it down. And so I'm just confused as to how from July 28th, when we have a planning board who I assume makes these decisions, how they voted it down, and yet I had heard later that that got turned around. So I was hoping just for some clarification on that as to how things transpired. And then also, are what the builder or the owner proposed to the abutters, is that what was agreed on in executive session? Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, we do have an agenda item later on this evening to talk about this particular piece of property, and the Conservation Commission has posted a meeting, and if they have a quorum here, they might very well partake in that discussion. Within reason, I think we can open it up to any questions at that particular point in time as well. Hopefully we will clear up some of the misconceptions around what executive session is and what impact, if any, that has on open government, and what the difference between the planning board and the zoning board of appeals and the selectmen, and what roles they all play in this transaction. So with any luck, we'll air this all out. One of the things that I try to do as chair is to keep track of the time of the meeting, and because it was posted the way it is, there may be people who are planning to come later in the meeting to participate in that, so I'm going to hold a more detailed discussion on that until it's placed on the agenda. So I'll move on, but we very definitely plan to discuss what steps we're out in this whole process, and what we do next, and we'll, within reason, try to allow for questions at that point. Our first appointment is with the IT director, Steve Malandrandos, who's going to walk us through our new website. Do you want to say anything about this? Or?
Yes, the long-awaited website we've talked about for probably a year now. So we're very excited to launch the new website. I don't know if many of you have seen it. It came out today. The link was live. So Steve will walk us through some of the features that are new. But I'm very pleased with how it came out, and the content and the aesthetics of the site as well.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come up here and just briefly discuss our new website. I did want to start quickly with the design itself. It's what's called a responsive design. So if you'll watch the projector there, as you shrink the site, like if it was a mobile device, everything sort of moves into the vertical and readjusts itself, so you don't have everything jammed up into one corner. You can still see all the links. It looks just as good on a phone as it does on a larger screen. Most of navigation is done through what's called the mega menu. It's right on the top here. Everything is categorized fairly simply: resident information, business information, a link to our How Do I, which leads me into the primary reason, or the primary focus when we redesigned the site, was citizen engagement. We wanted to make sure everyone had the opportunity to, as we spoke about transparency, see everything that's going on, know about every meeting, the opportunity to volunteer if they want to for boards or committees. So in that interest, we have a link called, under How Do I, called Stay Connected. That immediately brings you right to all of our Facebook feeds for the town, and I believe the YouTube feed is on there as well. If not, it's right up here in the top corner. YouTube channel has all these meetings as well as any other meeting that's recorded by the PACC. That how do I link where it says stay connected is also right here under get connected, brings you right to the same place. So we keep all that sort of right in front so everybody can see it and get a link to those feeds that have all current information on them. So we also have an email alerting functionality, and when you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll see a link that says My Account. If you don't have an account with the website, any resident can sign, anybody can sign up really. When you click on the My Account page, if you don't have an account, it'll give you a link to create an account. You just give it your email address, your name, and then you can very easily go into the sections that are available for email alerts, such as, for example, minutes and agendas. If you click into the minutes and agenda section, pick any agenda you like, there'll be a subscribe button down here. Now, when you click that subscribe button, you actually get some options. You can subscribe to that agenda itself. Typically, our agendas are sorted by year, so if you subscribe to the 2018 Selectmen Meeting agendas, anytime a new agenda is posted in that category, you'll get an email saying that it's up there. You can subscribe to agendas and minutes in general. If you check that box there, you'll get an email anytime any new agenda or minute is posted on the website with a link right to where it is. That also works for site-wide alerts, any new content added to the site. That would be a busy email inbox because we add a lot of content. News and announcements, which are now prominently displayed on the home page with images as well, makes them much easier to see, much easier to sort of pick out something you want to take a look at. So you can get email alerts on that as well. Minutes and agendas, calendar items. So we also add each meeting to the town calendar so you can see where and when things are. Job postings, you can also request email alerts on that. Property listings and also RFPs if the town has any of those out looking for proposals.
Now, how often is the calendar updated? The current calendar, on the old website wasn't much information on it.
The functionality of the old calendar was pretty bad, to be honest. The new calendar is much better to use, and we plan to, at least I think the plan is to, whenever an agenda is posted, post a calendar item at the same time, which references back to that agenda or minutes.
Great.
So that you can see immediately on the calendar of the Selectmen meeting tonight. If you click on the link, you'll see its references and agenda as well. You can just click on that agenda. It takes you right to it.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's pretty much all I had for the demo. I'd love to take any questions you guys have.
This is live now, Steve?
It is live now, yep, as of this morning. The way going to live on a new website works is a little tricky. The changes have to sort of propagate throughout the whole internet, so people at their house may try to get to this right now and it may not come up. A reboot might fix that, or just waiting until the morning might fix that when it propagates throughout the whole internet.
And how is content added?
So each department, or most departments, have someone that went to a training on how to add content to the website. So I will add some content, the town manager adds some content, and various departments can add their own content on their own departmental pages.
Okay, great, thank you.
How about boards and committees? Are they going to be entering their agendas, et cetera?
We can train anyone to use it. It's very simple.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone on a board or commission wanted to learn how to do that, I'd be happy to give them it would be a 15-minute tutorial, is about all it would need.
Great, maybe we should send an email out to the boards and committees, making sure they're aware of that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
For the meantime, we've set up just department employees that work for the town that are responsible for every board or commission that reports, they're under their jurisdiction.
So there is a town contact for
Yes.
all the boards and committees?
That's responsible for updating those pages and the content.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. We've been waiting for this.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm happy it's up.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. And we will continue to improve on it as well. I see the Stay Connected, Get Connected page expanding, that use communicating with the public. I'd like to create some kind of survey to see what kinds of methods people would like to be communicated to and from, to get information, and for us to receive information, what methods are the best method.
I signed up while he was doing his presentation. So it's pretty easy to do.
Our next agenda item is an update from the Land Use Director on the status of the MS4 Phase 2 permit for stormwater. Phyllis, did you want to say something before you started, or?
Well, are you able to get the ducky thing? All right.
Makes it easier to talk to.
Oh, I think they were unable to get the sound.
Yeah, I'm not getting any sound. The speakers are turned all the way up.
Right. So it's really saying that what happens to stormwater is it just goes down the drain and goes into our lakes and ponds and rivers and oceans. And we have to be much more careful about the oil that drips from our cars. And when the land is impermeable, when it's paved, the land can't absorb the water and filter it before it gets into water bodies. So it just goes down the impermeable surface and ends up in the waterways. And long ago, the EPA got after all the big industrial polluters and said, okay, clean it up. And so they took care of all of that. And they went, the water's still not clean. What's wrong? And they realized that all the municipalities, all in the states, all over the country, were dumping lots of stuff either on purpose or by accident into our waterways. And so they came out with a permit called the MS4, the
Municipal Separate Stormwater Sewer System Permit.
And decided that everybody needed to do a much better job, DPWs, towns, and we're in the second set of the municipal MS4 permit. This is the second release of a permit, and right now we have to give to the Department of Environmental Protection a notice of intent on how we're going to comply with this permit over the next 5 to 10 years. This is this is kind of the roadmap. This is what we're going to do. By June, when is it that we have to have the stormwater plan?
Oh, you're doing great, Al. By June 30th, 2019.
We have to have the rubber meets the road. Okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is which departments are going to do it, and this is how much it's going to cost. So the phase that we're in now is just this is our plan. And the rubber isn't meeting the road yet. And Adam will do a great job.
Thank you. Have a nice evening. So, as Phyllis mentioned, currently we're in year 1, month 3 of the 2018 Phase 2 MS4 permit issued by EPA. Prior to that, we were in year 15 of the original Phase 2 permit issued by EPA in 2003. The permit we're talking about tonight is sort of an exponentially grown permit. The original MS4 permit was kind of like, yeah, you know, all you little cities and towns have this fancy system where you collect stormwater and you dump it somewhere, and you really should start taking care of that. And it's in response to the Clean Water Act. And essentially what EPA does is give you a series of goals. You need to achieve this, but they don't tell you how to do it, because then, you know, you can monkey about with what system you have, what kind of money you have, and what's reasonably appropriate for your community. So the original permit was a 5-year permit. So the second Phase 2 permit was supposed to be issued in 2008. Clearly that didn't happen. So this permit is issued in a sort of 10-year time frame. And what we're talking about tonight is, as Phyllis said is the notice of intent. And this is essentially the town standing up, raising their hand and saying, we're going to comply with the Phase 2 permit. Here's, in general, what we kind of plan to do. And this is what we're going to use as sort of the outline for when we write our comprehensive stormwater management plan. And now the comprehensive stormwater management plan is also a living document. So EPA is not going to say, you said in year 1 you're going to do this, and you didn't do that, you did this other thing that you said you were going to do in year 2. As long as you're accomplishing the goals and you're making progress through and you have a logical explanation, reason for the way you're doing things, they're going to work with you. And the comprehensive stormwater management plan will give us a real cost on a lot of these things. If you look through the document you have in your Google Drive, it assigns certain things to certain committees or departments or individuals, mostly through the minimum control measures 1 through 6. And you'll see a lot of it is the land use department or the stormwater task force or the DPW, because this is a lot of stuff that's heavy on regulation, communication, and actual capital project stuff. As you do the comprehensive stormwater management plan, that might get flushed out to cover a lot more things. And what we may find is that some departments aren't necessarily staffed or they don't have the experience to do these sort of things. And you might add in conjunction with a consultant, and that might color the cost estimate a little bit. But really what we're talking about now is telling the EPA that we're gonna play along and we're gonna do our part. Anything that's in this plan can ultimately be changed. It's not something that is just sort of randomly done and we're just going to fix it later. It's thoughtfully presented, but at 50,000 feet. And as we do the stormwater management plan, we get down to 10 and 5, depending on the activity we're talking about. And each year, as you do the activity, that gets flushed out a little bit more based on funding, based on what you did the previous year. And every, I think it's September 29th, which is kind of a random date, but that's when our annual reports are now due. So September 29th, 2019, our first annual report will be due. And that will be 12 months after we've submitted the notice of intent, and it will actually cover May 1st through June 30th of 2018 to 2019, because the previous permits, their annual reporting was due as of May 1st. And then it'll start to cover essentially our fiscal year, which will make reporting a little bit easier, tying projects to town meeting, to funding, to budgets, and you'll be able to sort of closer align what the town is doing with what the government's requiring. I really could kind of talk all night, and I think you guys know that, so I'll stop myself and I'll let you guys ask any questions that you might have.
An example of something we're doing is just being at the Stillman Fair this weekend. We'll have a big Enviroscape, which sort of shows pollution, and we'll have information, and that's one of our education and outreach activities.
Is there any movement to have the state take over the review of this instead of the federal
I was going to talk about that, but I didn't think you'd care. Yes, there is. The DEP has been in discussions with the EPA through the writing of this permit. The DEP was actually a co-signer of the issuance of the permit, which is sort of we're one of, I think, 3 or 4 states that doesn't currently have what they call primacy, which is they're the issuer and enforcer of the permit. And so by signing on to it, they've taken some responsibility for it, and they now have some skin in the game. There's a push to do it. There's a significant staff increase required. There's some budgeting. There's some specialization. Fred Sivian, who's sort of the state guru on the permit, likes to say 3 to 5 years. He's hopeful for 3, but realistically he tends to lean towards 5. So that would put us through the first half of this permit, which is essentially moving through the minimum control measures or the MCMs once. There's a few items in the permit that actually have a 10-year lifespan. Stuff like wet weather outfall testing, which is a new requirement, which means that if you have outfalls, which is where the storm sewer daylights, anywhere that the water discharges, if they find through dry weather monitoring that there's something that's producing water in what's supposed to be the dry season, they require wet weather monitoring. So you have to go out when it's raining and test it, and it's been a really contentious thing, but that goes over 10 years. So they've built it so that you do 5 years and you kind of redo 5 years, and there's some stuff that you drag over 10. But ultimately, I think Massachusetts will take it over.
And the
It's
reason,
not anticipated that it'll change the requirements very
right.
much.
The only part I was wondering is whether there would be additional funding from the state, because there's probably not going to be from the federal government. Because they may own it more.
I think that's fairly unlikely. And I only say that because it's everywhere. And the state is funding stormwater in a lot of, I'll say roundabout, I'm sure some people would say creative ways. They call it different stuff and use this stuff on stormwater projects that kind of solves another problem related to stormwater. I think what the hope is that it increases communication. The people at the state know these localities a little bit better. They have a relationship. They're dealing with them on other issues, and there's a lot of interconnection between stormwater and everything. So it creates a little bit more camaraderie and communication that would either make the permit easier to comply with, or might sort of shape the way that the permit is written as we move forward, that is more responsive to the challenges and constraints that Massachusetts communities face that someone in Arizona or Oregon or Kansas might not, both based on government structure, the lack of county government, the home rule petition, all of that, and just local infrastructure and weather patterns.
The other thing I would just sort of, because it's going to be about money one way or the other, whether it's operations or capital, just making sure that this gets into the capital budgeting process with the understanding that when we have opportunities of people asking us for, by our elected representatives, saying what are the projects that are shovel ready to go, we can say the Stormwater Task Force has the following drainage programs that are ready to go. If we can have all of those, then we're already prepared.
And that'll be part of the management plan. It will be, here's what we're doing, here's what it costs, here's the, at least the shovel-ready portion of, we want to do this on a global scale. And getting the design done in some cases might mean the town has to shell out some money somewhere along the line, but that also might be a living, breathing thing that happens as money becomes available. But point is well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis.
When's a good time to check in again?
2060.
Yeah.
No, there needs to be an annual report done. I would expect that as the management plan takes shape, I'm going to say probably around the holidays or New Year, you'll see the Stormwater Task Force come back and say, hey, we've got this management plan. It's in, our third draft. It's our first public draft. Let's start talking about what's in it, and does this seem reasonable? This is what the costs look like. And I think there'll probably be a fairly robust discussion about funding and where that comes from and what it looks like on a long-term basis, because this is something that, as much as it's something that we should do as a moral and environmental obligation, there's a legal obligation that the town has to move this program forward and fund it on a regular basis, and identifying a fixed set of funding over a long period of time is something that's important, and with the constant demands between public safety, school, and just general government changing and growing and happening, this needs to be factored in a way that gives it a long-term stability. So that's my short pitch now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would think around the first of the year, because we'll have several discussions about, this, where the rubber meets the road management plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next appointment is a weekday entertainment license for the Stillman Country Fair.
Hi, I'm Julia Stillman from Stillman Dairy Farm and from the planning committee for the fair. And we're looking to get a entertainment license for 4 bands to play on Saturday, and the fair runs from 11 to 5.
The information is in your packet.
It doesn't look like there's anything checked off.
So it says other weekday entertainment. So it doesn't. Yep.
Just weekday entertainment,
Yep.
so that's the only thing they're asking
Yeah.
for.
So I would make a motion that we approve the weekday entertainment license for the date again?
September 15th.
September 15th?
No.
September 8th?
So it's the 8th, but then the rain date
Rain
is a
date of
week
the
later.
15th, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Second that.
Is there any discussion?
You're going to have 4 bands?
Yes.
Will they be playing simultaneously?
No. So it's 4
Battle
bands.
of bands.
So the duration will be 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. They play one after the other. Each band actually has at least one member from Lunenburg. So it's Wheelhouse, Stones in Rotation, JV and the B Team, and oh my gosh, what's the other band? Phineas Gage. Whoever that was. Oh yeah, it's on the back of my shirt. Yeah. Put it there for a reason. Yes.
Great. I'd just like to mention that in looking at the package, we still don't have the insurance certificate or the
So I got an
the
email
health
at
department.
4:45 today that's been added to our policy, so there should be a fax coming tomorrow morning to you.
Okay. And the health department?
The health department, I worked with Neshoba, and all the food trucks are all permitted, and we're good to go with those.
Okay. So as soon as the office sees them, we'll release all these things.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank
Good
you
luck.
so much.
Thank
See
you.
you at the fair.
Yep, see you then.
All right. We have 2 resignations. The first one is the building commissioner. I'll read his letter. Please accept this letter of resignation as building commissioner for the town of Lunenburg effective September 13th, 2018. Thank you for the opportunity to have served the citizens of Lunenburg for the past 2 years. I would also like to take this opportunity to praise Lisa Normandin, administrative assistant to the building department, for all her help. She is very much an asset to the town. It has been a pleasure to work with Adam Burney, land use director. I have found Adam to be knowledgeable of both town and local zoning. For the last year, I have worked with Andrew Hudson, local inspector. Andrew has a lot of knowledge of Lunenburg, having grown up here. He has taken and passed exams of local inspector, which qualifies him for the position of building commissioner. Shortly, he will be taking the classes for building commissioner. I would recommend he be considered for the position of building commissioner. Again, thank you, Gary Rhodes, building commissioner. So,
And I want to publicly thank Gary as well. He's been an asset to the town and has helped the town out when we couldn't find a building commissioner, and was, I think, a great mentor to our local inspector, and he's ready to take on that role. We are posting that position internally, which we're required to do, so for a period of time, and then I'm assuming Andrew will apply, and we'll do that appointment at a future meeting.
And what sort of qualifications are required?
He will have to pass certification tests for the building commissioner.
Before he can-
Certain tests, but the town is allowed to have a waiver for up to 18 months for that to occur. So he can take those tests within that time frame, and he can be our building commissioner during that period.
Is it an appointment that you make?
Yes.
Thank you. No, I thought that Gary Rhodes did a great job. When he presented before us, I thought he was very professional and very knowledgeable, and I will miss him.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that?
But do we need to?
No.
Okay. Since we didn't appoint.
Okay, and then I also have a resignation of a truck driver, operator, laborer, Mike Roberts, and there's no winner in there, but just for your information.
Yes.
Our next item of business is the town manager report.
Okay. So an update on the Summer Street Road reconstruction project. The contractor has added a second drainage crew this morning. They're progressing with drainage through Lunenburg section of the project, and the drainage in Fitchburg is complete. They're hoping to be able to reclaim the project from the Fitchburg end of the project to the Baker Brook Bridge this fall. This is dependent on getting approval of the mixed design from Mass DOT and the reclaiming subcontractor schedule. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Summer Street Road reconstruction project will be Wednesday, September 12th at 3 p.m. and will be at Kelly Auto, which is 40 Summer Street in Lunenburg, which is across from Donnelly's Pub. The Mass Department of Environmental Protection Recycling Dividends Program Award. The town applies for this and has received every year a grant under Mass DEP's Recycling Dividends Program, and this year was awarded $7,200. The Recycling Dividends Program provides payments to towns that have implemented specific programs and policies proven to maximize reuse, recycling, and waste reduction. I want to thank our Executive Assistant, Elaine Peterson, and Tessa David of Mass Toss Cooperative for working together to apply for this grant, and for the DPW for administering the purchase and resale of the rain barrels, compost bins, and kitchen compost buckets that are sold down at the DPW as part of this program. The conceptual design for municipal offices at the TC Passios. Paul Leineck of Haynes, Leineck & Smith will be presenting the initial conceptual design for the municipal offices at the TC Passios at the September 11th Selectmen's Meeting prior to the Town Facilities Workshop portion of that meeting. Netflix scouting for houses in area towns. I was contacted and met with an assistant location manager from Netflix that he is in town currently scouting for houses to be used as a filming location for a Netflix television series that will begin filming in Massachusetts this fall. The primary location for filming will be in the town of Lancaster, but they are looking for houses in area towns that have a certain look. They do not go door to door, but are driving through the community, and if the scouting manager thinks a home would qualify, they leave a flyer in the mailbox. If they do happen to do any filming in town, they will contact our office, the police department, and the DPW to make sure all public safety concerns are addressed. The Complete Streets Prioritization Plan has been approved, and that was approved today by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. The next step is to work on a project or projects to submit to Mass DOT for up to $400,000 in construction project costs. This will be a future agenda item. An update from the Lunenburg Water District. The Lunenburg Water District Superintendent notified me that they are discussing with the town of Lancaster the possibility of extending Lunenburg Water into Lancaster. They are looking into signing an intermunicipal agreement that would cover all aspects of this project. The water commissioners would like to involve the selectmen in the process and have invited the board to have a workshop meeting at one of their upcoming meetings to cover any concerns the board may have. The water commissioners meet the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. The Water District Superintendent also notified me that the commissioners have a special meeting tomorrow night to appropriate money to build a new garage or office. This project will be funded using USDA money, which requires the funding for the entire estimated cost to be allocated prior to going out to bid. The engineer put numbers in that are extremely high to make sure they had enough. They are not intending to raise water rates to pay for this project, but will use the revenues they receive from the 4 cellular companies with their equipment on their water tanks and funds available when current loans are paid off in the immediate future, so as to pay for all the projects out of the current operating budget. If the board has any questions on this project, our office will forward those along to the superintendent. Department head updates. At our monthly department head meeting on August 28th, we had 2 guest speakers, our risk management representative from insurance company and Pam McLeod from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. Our risk management representative spoke about Maya's risk management grant program that covers safety training costs, safety equipment, and property loss items up to a grant award of $10,000. Chief Marino has submitted an application for approximately $8,900 for EVOC training for officers. I am looking to see what other items we need in order to request up to the full $10,000.
What's EVOC?
Emergency vehicle operations training. It's so simulated training in vehicles.
Thank you for asking. Ewok.
Yeah, Star Wars.
Our risk manager will be coming out at the end of the month to do a walkthrough of 2 of our buildings for an audit and from a risk management perspective, and will identify items we should address. Also, due to the new OSHA requirements for cities and towns, we asked to host an OSHA training for key staff, and that will be held on November 1st. Council on Aging Director Sue Doherty coordinated the special guest speaker from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs to come speak up about becoming an age-friendly, dementia-friendly community. The next step is to form a working group that consists of the appropriate public officials, community groups, health organizations, and the Business Association. Sue will be coming to the board to discuss this in further detail at a future meeting to ask for the board's support. And here are some other highlights from the departmental portion of our meeting. Cable. The cable department has completed rearranging their studio to make better use of the space, ordered some new equipment that was needed, and hired 2 new part-time videographers in June, and another 2 will be starting shortly. An audio unit that was not working in the town hall meeting room has been replaced recently, and they are working on a botany series and town public relations series, including a promotional video of the Eagle House. The DPW director has been involved in the Summer Street project, following up with Mass DOT and how the Chase Road project will be rectified, striping parking lots, oversight of the paving projects that will continue through the fall, and is already gearing up for winter operations for sand and salt. The DPW is significantly understaffed right now. The facilities director retired in July. There's a vacant truck driver equipment operator position, and another truck driver equipment operator position will be resigning in October. The DPW director and I are working on a staffing and reorganization of the department that will help alleviate the effects of the staffing shortage on operations. The police department, the chief provided a handout on new legislation for extreme risk protection orders that allows a petition to be filed by a family, household member, or police department where the respondent lives that would allow a judge to issue an order that suspends a person's license to possess or carry a gun if that person poses a risk of causing bodily injury to themselves or others. The police department is working on their accreditation and have recently purchased the ATV, 2 cruisers, and the patrol boat that were part of the fiscal 19 capital plan. The land use director reported that the planning board decided to ask for an extension of the moratorium on recreational marijuana at the special town meeting, and will be advertising a schedule of workshops that will discuss all the various recreational marijuana permitting. The Settlers Solar special permit hearing has been continued until September 10th due to some additional requirements that were not part of the original application. The library summer reading program, and Project Bread are now complete and were both successful programs. The fire department advertised for the 2 new positions, for EMT firefighter positions in June, but due to the pay range did not have qualified paramedics apply, so promoted 2 internal candidates to full-time paramedic EMTs. One of the new hires is currently enrolled in paramedic training at Mount Wachusett and will complete the program in early fiscal 20. The fire chief has ordered the ladder truck off the state bid vendor and is expected to be complete by the end of fiscal year or very beginning of next fiscal year.
I don't understand that sentence.
The truck has been ordered up the state bid list, so they have to build it, and it will be ready by the end of this fiscal year, the beginning of next.
When they use this, the state bidding list, they don't have to go out for bid for all the other people.
Okay.
It's already bid for them.
Makes sense, thank you.
Other announcements, meetings. I will be attending the Personnel Committee meeting on Monday, September 10th, and the Finance Committee member meeting on September 13th.
I just have one question going back to Summer Street. Reclamation, I think that is where they dig up or scarify the top of the pavement and they remix it and put it back down. Is that what the mix is?
I believe so.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Sure.
On the in the land use director's report, if they ask for an extension of the moratorium on recreational marijuana at the special town meeting, and they don't, and it's voted down, where are we?
The land use director is here, so I'll let him answer that question.
If it were voted down, then marijuana businesses would be permitted under the most closely associated permitted use that we currently have within our zoning bylaw. And I'm not a legal scholar, but I think that there's arguments that could be made in two directions. One would say you would go to the table of uses and, you know, you would be on your way with, you know, retail as retail, et cetera. But I also think there's an argument that we have a medical or a registered marijuana dispensary bylaw that requires special permits. I don't, you know, haven't discussed it with town council, but I believe that one could make an argument that since it's marijuana related, that it may be able to fall under that category. I would, I guess, question the thinking behind voting down the moratorium. The moratorium doesn't outright prohibit in the long term, even if one were a proponent of legal adult use marijuana and wished to have such in Lunenburg, allowing it as a use, you know, without any real control or thought, has a lot of potential to cause a lot of issue. You know, I think just looking at places like Colorado and California, you live here. You would think that you would want, again, even if you want to be able to drive down the street and get your pot brownie or, you know, your bag of weed or whatever you want, you want it to be done thoughtfully. You want it to be done well in a way that doesn't negatively impact your community. So the moratorium is intended.
But we've already had a whole year of a moratorium.
Well, we did. Well, we had 18 months. No, I guess it was a year, wasn't it? And the intent was to work within the Cannabis Control Commission's regulations. And so when those regulations were put out, they included a requirement that if you were a yes community on question 4 in 2016, you're required to do a two-tier approach to prohibit any or all marijuana businesses in your community. And that two-tier approach is a local ballot vote and a town meeting vote for a bylaw. The planning board has decided they'd like to do a bifurcated approach where they offer the community the opportunity to vote on prohibition while presenting thoughtful, reasonable regulations for some or all of the proposed marijuana businesses. In order to do the ballot vote, it needs to be on a local ballot. It cannot be on a statewide ballot. So the town is unable to, without holding a special election, do this at this current time for this current town meeting. The planning board felt that it would be inappropriate and, you know, probably bothersome to try and have a special election between a I mean, we had a special primary today, we have an election coming up in November, and then we have our annual election in May. Jamming another election in there for 5 or potentially 6 questions seemed, the planning board felt that not only would they have the opportunity to spend 6 months being thoughtful and getting as much local feedback on marijuana regulations as possible, they would not incur additional cost or confusion or otherwise for the community. And town elections are something that, well, I mean, the same people go to them every year, but it's everybody knows when it is, and the people who go. And if you throw up an election in the middle of January to do 6 questions about pot, who shows up?
I totally understand.
So that, and the Attorney General has started approving moratoriums through June of next year. I don't see her going much further, or her office going much further than that. And I think the planning board has a reasonable and defensible position on where they are with it.
Well, I guess I just would hope that the town is prepared for the what if. If it fails, what's the next step?
When does the current moratorium end?
December 1st.
Yeah. And the other question I'd have is whether this could be regulated like a liquor store, whether that would...
You mean
retail?
As far as...
If the town voted down the moratorium and it came into place, whether this would be similar to a liquor store, which is a retail store selling an adult beverage.
I'm not sure how closely any of you all have followed the I'll call it the marijuana industry, because I guess that's what it is, and the state's regulation of it. It's sort of the inverse of the alcohol industry in Massachusetts, where you're the first stop and selectmen are really the original licensing authority, and it goes to the state, and I don't want to say they rubber stamp it, but the majority of the meat and potatoes happens here.
I was just talking about just the zoning location part.
Oh, I mean, it would probably be, again, I mean, we're talking about parsing out interpretation at that point, and I don't want to...
Yeah, no, not the process, just the location.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Adam. Any other questions on the town manager report? Okay.
Any comment on the joint meeting with the water district?
Oh, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. More communication.
Are those Wednesdays, are board members available?
Second and fourth.
So it's this...
School committee's first and third.
The same time as the charter committee, but we could, still meet. We aren't meeting every single time. We haven't set those yet. We've got the meeting next Wednesday.
Okay.
So if it could be the following one.
Right. And comments on the building project, if any?
I'm planning on attending the meeting.
Which is tomorrow night at 6:30, I think.
6.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. First item of old business is the Board of Selectmen goals. Again, I just call your attention. They're on our agenda each week so that we can speak to them if anyone chooses to. We do have a workshop planned for next week to zero in on goal number 2. Next item is the Mort contract.
So I can set this discussion up.
Please.
This contract was drafted by MART, Montechusett Regional Transit Authority, with the input of all the towns in that consortium. So our council looked at it more than once. We received feedback. I had the Council on Aging Director look at it as well for her feedback, because one major component of it is the reimbursement procedure for the dispatcher scheduler for the van services through the Council on Aging. So everyone is satisfied with the product, and so I recommend the board proceed with signing off on it.
It's probably been 2 years in the making, right?
Yes.
We've
Was
been working
talked
on it a
about
long time.
every meeting that I attended.
There's a copy of the contract in your packages. Any questions or comments?
I just note that MART covers all the direct costs for the vehicle and covers the drivers, covers indirect costs to an extent. So it's...
I think it's very comprehensive.
I would make a motion we approve this contract and authorize, are we all signing or are you?
No, just me.
And authorize the chair to sign the contract.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Thanks for getting this done, Heather.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. Special town meeting, open and closing of the warrant dates.
So the board did vote on the special town meeting date at the last meeting and accepted the calendar, but I think it would be for the public to know the dates, and we can circulate the opening and closing of the warrant dates to all interested parties and advertise in the paper.
Okay. What's proposed here is the opening of the warrant by the Board of Selectmen on September 18th. Warrant notice sent to the Ledger on September 24th. Warrant notice in local paper September 28th. Warrant closed for special town meeting at 6 p.m. on October 9th. Legal counsel review would commence on the October 10th. Finance committee review on October 11th. Board of Selectmen final vote on warrant articles and sign the warrant for posting on October 16th. Final warrant goes to the printer on October 17th. Warrant to the post office on October 29th. Warrant mailed to residents on October 31st. So that the special town meeting and all the requirements prior to that would lead up to a special town meeting on November 13th, 2018.
I would make a motion that we approve opening and closing of the warrant and other notice requirements as read by the chair.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty. The next item is a discussion about Shady Point Campground relative to concerns raised about boat safety, noise, and compliance with the ZBA special permit. Welcome back.
Again. So the last time that we were here, the building inspector and my department was in the process of continuing our investigation into where we were. We had found a 2001 special permit that was granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals with a couple of dozen conditions or more, including campsite limits and boat limits and people limits and all sorts of stuff. And as we looked further into it and had a few conversations with as the building inspector had a few conversations with the campground ownership, it's come to be the opinion of the building commissioner in our office that they have not enacted the permit. They never increased the number of campsites. They never took advantage of any of the condition, or never took advantage of any of the approvals within the permit, didn't record the permit, thus are not subject to the conditions of that permit. They continue to operate as a pre-existing non-conforming use, and from a perspective of enforcement through zoning, there's very little to be done in respect to enforcement on them. They are exempt from all the zoning bylaws going back to pretty much the inception of zoning, since they predate zoning.
So zoning came after 67?
1960.
So
1960.
they bought it in 67.
They bought it in 67, but if I'm not mistaken, the Shady Point Campground existed prior to that.
And it wasn't called Shady Point. It was Campbell's Beach.
Well, but it doesn't matter what the name of it was. It's the use. So where the use predates zoning, as the beach and the charging of admission and all of those things, and we've conferred with town council on this. His general opinion was that where the use has existed prior to the existence of zoning. The current zoning
Some use.
doesn't retroactively apply. Zoning is not a retroactive application. General bylaws would be. There may be some ability to continue enforcement of the boat safety concerns through the police department and their efforts on the water. There isn't a foreseeable zoning case against the property.
There is or is
there is not?
Okay.
And yet if we were to do, and not to connect them tightly, but if we were to enact any kind of entertainment bylaw, or we were to talk about a noise ordinance or anything like that.
If they were general bylaws, they
would apply to them like everybody else, right?
Correct.
Okay.
General bylaws become applicable across the board. There's no grandfathering is the term used for zoning. There's no pre-existing non-conforming as far as general bylaws go. Oftentimes, when one writes a general bylaw that is going to have application to an existing use or a series of existing uses, there's a conformance time built into it over a period of, depending on what it is, 30, 60, 90 days. But yeah, there's no grandfathering as far as general bylaws go.
Okay, I guess I go back to my original question. What are the rules they operate under?
So the use that they are doing has to be whatever the use that existed in 1960. So if it was a campground, if they had...
It's a mixture of pay campground and day swimmers, picnickers, etc.
Boat launchers.
Correct.
Jet ski launchers.
Correct.
And of course, there were no jet skis in 1960.
No, and this is, something that we talked with town council about, and
But it depends
I'm
if there were boats, and the question whether it's boats and stuff like that. The other question would be
it's a reasonable extrapolation of the use as it existed then to the use as it exists now. So, in 1965, it may have been someone with a transistor radio. Now it's someone with an iPhone and a Bluetooth speaker. There was, a 18-foot Boston whaler then. Now you're zooming around the lake on a jet ski. So it's one of those things that it's not cut and dry.
So it's
really
going to be factual. Some of the issues are going to be the intensity of whether something was done at a 10%, now it's 110%. That start change. If it's 10 versus 80, it may be okay. So that's part of the...
And it's a
Is this why the building commissioner resigned?
Good time to get out.
No, that's because he's already retired and wanted to fish for it.
So I think there's going to be more information on this coming forward that we need to have some additional discussion.
Because there is, people can bring their own alcohol. I mean, how does the town regulate a business like that? How does that work? What's the rules?
And I think not specific to Shady Point, we are in the process of putting together policies and bylaws, et cetera, for entertainment and overnight events and several other things. And I think we have to think of the broad spectrum of possibilities as the town puts them together and as the town votes at town meeting for them.
Sort of in some ways, it started when with the events on Holman Street.
Right.
How do we regulate?
And it brings up questions of noise ordinances, overnight camping, et cetera, and anything that the town enacts as a bylaw now would, I guess, apply to.
If it were a general bylaw, would apply across the board to those properties or uses that fall within the applicability standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Okay, our first item of current business is the conveyance of 161 Gilcrest Street and acquisition of property at 171 Gilcrest Street as a result of 2018 annual town meeting Article 22 vote, and the agenda item calls for us to sign a declaration that the acquisition of property is a unique acquisition under MGL, Chapter 30B, and to sign a DCAMM, whatever that is, I'm sure we'll learn, disclosure of beneficial interest. Now, there is also a quorum of the Conservation Commission with us this evening.
Yes, there is.
You want to call your meeting to order, Mr. Chair?
Call the September 4th meeting of the Conservation Commission to order.
Thank you. So, just to kind of set the stage, from a timeline point of view, there was an article passed at annual town meeting 2018 providing the selectmen or giving the selectmen authorization to enter into an agreement for some land acquisition. It's been termed a land swap. We can talk about that in a bit. And ultimately, that would lead through a process of things like unique acquisition under MGL 30 and DCAM disclosures, et cetera, to a point where there would be a purchase and sale agreement. During that process, and a couple of weeks ago, the board went into executive session for the purpose of discussing our negotiating strategy prior to those two events. It was deemed by the board, by myself, and voted by the board that it was to protect our negotiating interests in that process. And as a result, we did do that. We did instruct town council to negotiate, given some parameters that came out of that. Those minutes are now available. I'm not sure they're out yet, but they will be released once we approve them to be released. And our town council discussed with the landowners town council those items. They've come to an agreement in terms, and now we're moving down the process. All parts of that, we believe, are being done in open meeting with transparency, and we're here to talk about the next step along that journey.
Two other things, which was mentioned, it wasn't the planning board, it was the zoning board of appeals who had a hearing in which they did not approve a particular application by the property owner developer. Once that went away, what came before the Board of Selectmen was a different plan. So therefore, it didn't just come back to us at that point. One of the things about the executive session process with negotiating, part of the things that we discussed in the private, the closed session was our negotiating position, particularly we would like to see this, or we'd like to see this. If you can't get this, we'd like to see this. And that's something you don't do. It's best not to do that in a public session because you're going to give your negotiating position away to the other side. And that's why we were in executive session at that point.
And it's not privacy from the public, it's privacy from the people you're negotiating with.
Right.
And there are complete minutes written and they're released as soon as
correct
the issue is resolved.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in regards to going into executive session, we always have the option to keep things in open meeting. And when it comes to negotiating, in terms of identifying a detrimental effect, it's usually if a municipality is purchasing, that it's done more privately. And typically in any transaction, if you're selling or conveying, doing it openly could create more interest in a parcel or more interest in something. So when I spoke to the Attorney General's office about Purpose 6, you do have to have a detrimental effect identified. And I've spent weeks on this, and I can't understand what our detrimental effect was in essentially giving away town-owned property for free. If we were more open about it, perhaps other people might have wanted the path, and technically that creates a detrimental effect against the town. In terms of swapping something owned for something eased, perhaps we could have sold the path we could have conveyed it for money. And so I think doing it behind closed doors, the detrimental effect was to everybody from Gilchrist Street who we didn't offer to come in for a public hearing or didn't take their input. I would dial back to Article 22. And really thinking it was a bit deceptive because the main line I go back to every time I think about it is that it was presented to us that it would be to gain meaningful access to the Lane property. And the path we're conveying essentially was meaningful access to the Lane property. It was owned access with a historic stone wall, people already using it, we come to find out. So when we go to Article 22, and I will still continue to question this with the state, we said to the town, or I wasn't there at the time, but we were told at town meeting, here, Article 22, to gain meaningful access. And the transaction they described, actually, as I think a resident said, wasn't even compliant with our zoning. And so I still have a really hard time understanding what's happening here. And I don't think we are completely transparent. I don't think people completely understand what we're doing. And I think this path is very valuable to the people who want it because it gives them 2 more lots. And so if they're going to get a large advantage in basically getting this path for free, we could have at least maybe sold it and then had some money to buy a capital item. I don't understand what we're doing. I believe we had some violations of open meeting law that night. And interestingly, we were given a letter, and that same letter now exists with a new date on it, because one of the things, I mean, we had this letter that was dated a date of which it couldn't have been created if it was in compliance with open meeting law, and then I see this same letter here tonight with a new date on it. So I'm uncomfortable still. Thank you.
If I may, I couldn't disagree more with basically everything you just said. I feel like Mr. Ebersol did a good job explaining why we negotiated in executive session to protect our negotiating stance. We did not make any decisions based on the direction of where we're going with the sale of this land or transfer of this land. It was all about negotiating the strategy based on the town meeting warrant article that was approved by the town that gave us a direction that we were to negotiate how we want to do this land swap. It was not a discussion of whether we want to do it or not. It was taking a direction we were given by the town in town meeting. You couldn't have more eyes on this than you did that day. And we were just acting on the direction we were given. So I understand there's some concerns now from people who maybe missed it back then, but it's not a secret initiative by the Board of Selectmen. It was going on a directive we were given by the town that had endorsement by the Conservation Commission, who I have full faith in to be good stewards of our town conservation land. So again, I could not disagree with you more in this was being a shady backhanded.
Mr. Chair,
Chairman,
if I may.
So one of the things that, now that we can actually talk about what we talked about since it's coming before us before a vote, and why I supported going to an executive session because I was talking about negotiating. Didn't know what we were going to negotiate until we got into the meeting, other than what was given to us through public comment before, at the beginning of the meeting, and public comment before we went into executive session, pro and con on this part. So the current access, which is going to be proposed to be deeded away, is being replaced by an easement. But in addition to that, we are receiving 2.3 acres of land in fee that comes to the town adjacent to the Lane property. In addition, I'm estimating about 5 acres that will now be under permanent conservation easement restriction where there is currently a trail going through that. And that therefore we are getting, I believe, a good deal that we went through the negotiation process, and we're not just swapping one land for another land. We're swapping this access to this access, getting this land in back, and getting a conservation easement for that. So I think that I believe that we followed the requirements of the open meeting law, and then when we actually went into negotiation process that I believe they've accepted, I believe we've got a good deal.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Adams?
Sure. So Chapter 16 of Section 30B is, I mean, we kept saying land swap, and so when I started asking questions under the procurement laws in Massachusetts, you technically can't swap land, and I wanted to see, okay, are we following Section 16 of Chapter 30B? So I asked one initial question about the appraisal of 161 Gilchrist Street, and nobody could give me an answer. So without having that piece, we didn't identify the value of the land, which would have given us the next step. And then I emailed, did we file this with the Central Registry of Deeds? We had not. And so I've done a lot of work on this, and I don't think we were following land procurement laws. And I mean, I have a lot of emails and a lot of work I've done on this. And I've spoken to the Inspector General's office about land, and just the way we've been describing it as a land swap technically isn't a legal transaction. So I researched other towns that they would call it more of a land exchange, because land swap is an illegal transaction. And when you looked at the town meeting warrant articles for a land exchange similar to this, it was spelled out in a much better way that was a lot more transparent, so people could understand what this for that was. We talk about conservation. It's an owned path for an easement. So first, I feel like that's a loss. But also what's really gained here is 2 more lots for a developer. I don't see what the town really gains, 2.33 acres. I mean, there's like 600 acres of contiguous conservation land there already with Largetown Forest in the lane. So that's such a small amount. This path is valuable to a developer, and I feel like everything we did benefits that transaction, and I'm sad that we did it.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's my understanding that the proposal is to convey a 20-foot strip of land owned by the town of Lunenburg for a parcel of backland containing Malpas Brook, an easement of backland containing a trail and wetlands draining into Malpas Brook, and an easement of 15-foot connecting the trail to Gilchrist Street. The total land and land under easement conveyed to the town would be approximately 7 acres. That's in exchange for conveying the 20-foot strip of land. Am I mistaken?
No,
or is that correct?
That's the part.
Those details are no longer correct, especially the 7 acres.
Well, there's 2.3 acres of actual land, and my estimate is about 5 acres of conservation. If you double that, based on just a visual of the plan, there's about 5 acres. That's pretty close to the 7 acres of total.
But not of owned land.
What is it that we're giving up? A 20-foot strip?
I don't know what the...
0.72 acres.
0.72 acres.
0.72 acres.
Is it?
We're giving up.
So an acre is about 40,000, so that's about 30,000 square feet.
Around 30,000 square feet. And in exchange, we're getting about 5 acres?
2 acres owned, 5 acres restricted.
Okay. So the 2 acres we will own, and there is an additional 5 acres that will be restricted.
And then the easement is probably going to be similar to the one that we're transferring out.
Right, there will be no owned access.
In a minute. One of the things I do want to say is that, you know, while I appreciate your opinion, Mrs. Adams, we did have our town council with us the night we went into executive session, and he gave us a legal opinion that it was appropriate for us to go into, to vote whether to go into executive session, which we did vote. I'd also like to point out that while I appreciate your opinion on whether it's a good deal or it isn't, the original proposition that was made to the town through Article 22 was sponsored by the Conservation Commission, and I am told that they unanimously support the current position, and I have a letter from them, and they are here this evening, so I certainly would want to hear their input as well. So if you gentlemen would want to weigh in, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. My name is Richard Bursch. I'm the chairman of Lunenburg Conservation Commission. I live at 308 Electric Ave in Lunenburg. The Conservation Commission did in fact review the proposal that's before us as well as the previous proposal. The first thing we ask is what happens if we do nothing. So if we do nothing, there's currently a plan to allow for 5 homes to be built on that property today in the current zoning bylaws. So they need no special permits, they need no ZBA permits. They can build 5 homes in there today. Several homeowners will now own the currently used property. There's a property that extends from Lane property that we own along Malpas Brook and terminates on Jane Gallagher's driveway.
Maybe we could put up the map now.
Oh, do you have the map? That would be great.
you want to keep talking.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chairman Richard.
What that?
Go ahead if you want.
Okay.
We'll get the map behind you in a minute.
All right. Currently, the trail that is on Sozik's property is used basically by the neighbors. We're trying to maintain that access. We're trying to protect the brook and the basin that runs into it.
So right now, people use private property?
Correct, yes. So other things that would happen if nothing was done, if we lost access up the current driveway, we would have to try to clear a new path on the 20-foot strip of land. I've walked the 20-foot strip of land. There is no trail on that 20-foot strip of land. There is no access from Gilchrist Street to the property, to the lane property. If you looked at the survey map that was done by Whitman and Bingham recently, there is, so that does kind of show, and I don't know if everybody is aware of the 20-foot strip of land.
I guess.
Valley Road, Gilchrist Street. This is currently the Harvey property. This is the stone wall on the left-hand side of the property. The current landowner has mowed part of the town property up about 150 feet. Then the wood line starts, and it is completely wooded and poison ivy covered with downed trees all the way along this wall. The wall ends at a wetland. There is no current way on town property to cross that wetland. We would have to try to construct a bridge or some other means of crossing over that wetland to continue on to get to lane property. Once we get to lane property, there is still no path to get over here to the current path that we have. So it would be very destructive to try to put in a new path along the currently owned property and out. This is Gallagher's driveway. Right now, there is an easement on the northern part, a 6-foot easement or a 10-foot easement on this side of the driveway that continues out to the town forest. There is no legal access from this easement to this side of the driveway. So at any point, Ms. Gallagher can stop public traffic from going up this driveway out to this trail.
Can I speak?
In a minute, please.
Other things that the Conservation Commission considered. New owners can convert this property and clear it for agriculture. And their activities would be exempt from the Conservation Commission. Currently in the state of Massachusetts, under the Massachusetts Zoning and Enabling Act of 2010, only 2 acres are required for agricultural exemptions. And another thing that would happen if we did nothing, 7 acres of Mulpus, including Mulpus Brook and wetland systems draining into the brook, would be vulnerable to the development of that property. The Conservation Commission then looked at benefits of the conveyance. The town would control the land containing Mulpus Brook, a trail, a new access easement which would go on the southerly side of Gallagher's driveway to the property, to the trail that already exists today. Conservation restrictions and exclusive use easements would be placed on the property for the use and control by the town of Lunenburg only. So the property owners would have no say in the land that is under easement and under conservation restriction. That land would be total control of the town of Lunenburg and the Lunenburg Conservation Commission. There were a few other questions that had come up that we had discussed. Parking. Right now, neither the 20-foot strip of land that we own, nor the proposed 15-foot easement is large enough to support any parking. This trail is for neighborhood access only. We have a nice big parking lot over on Holman Street for the residents to park their cars at and to get into the lane property. ATVs and snowmobiles. The use of this access and trail would be for pedestrian and bicycle traffic only. Without a parking area, the use of this trail by ATVs and snowmobiles would generally be done without permission and would be done by the local residents in the neighborhood. The Conservation Commission has worked with Lunenburg Police and landowners to try to stop the use of this trail by motorized vehicles. And the trail, as trails that we have in town, would be marked no motorized vehicles allowed. Control of the land was another thing we discussed. The easement proposed is exclusive use easement. The easement would be given to the town of Lunenburg under the care and control of the Lunenburg Conservation Commission. This would restrict the landowner from any use of the property that is under the easement. Conservation restriction would be placed on the property through the state of Massachusetts, and the town of Lunenburg and Conservation Commission would be the holders of the conservation restriction. And if you look in the MGL, the state considers a conservation restriction a restriction forever. So it's not something that can be easily easily changed for the use of the homeowner. So this would remain in the control and the use of the town of Lunenburg and the townspeople. As I said, worrying about development, it only takes 2 acres to develop the property as agriculture. So once they receive the exemption, they can clear it, they can have cows on it, they can have horses on it, they can have donkeys on it, they can do whatever they want, and the town has very little or no say in the use of that property. One of the other things we had talked about was the uniqueness. Currently, the 20-foot strip of land in the tax assessor's book is worth $5,000. So it is not by itself a valuable piece of property. The property alone has very little environmental value and very little environmental protection value. It's a 20-foot strip of land. It's not, by size alone, it is not able to provide protection to the brook, to the wetlands, to the wildlife. There's just, the land by itself doesn't do that. By getting control of the 7-acre parcel that includes the Mulpus Brook and the drainage basin, that provides quite a large area of protection for the Mulpus Brook. The land, again, and I'll walk out there with anybody that wants to go. There's no trail on that land. There's no way to get out there. There's no way to use it. You walk out, you have the wall on the left-hand side, you're going to stop. You can't get out to the lane property easily, and there is no way to construct a pathway easily to get out there. The town would receive, for the approximately 1/3 acre of land, the 2.5 acres of Mulpus Brook. That in itself is a significant parcel. Mulpus Brook is a cold water fishery. Brook trout in Mulpus Brook have a unique DNA line. They are not found anywhere else on Earth. They are unique to Mulpus Brook. That is a brook and a resource the town of Lunenburg needs to work very hard to protect. The town would receive the 15-foot exclusive use easement to the existing footpath, replacing the possible access along the current town parcel. We did put a counter out there at the property line of lane property. In 19 days, there were 123 separate groups that passed the counter. So that's quite a few people that are using that trail from lane onto the current Sozik property. So it is a well-used piece of property. And that was basically what we had talked about, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Bursch.
Because I'm not sure people understood which on this page where the restricted areas are.
So the town would be trading this 20-foot strip here for this 2 1/3 acre parcel. This is Mulpus Brook that runs through that parcel, and would receive the conservation restriction and exclusive use easement on this approximately 4.5 acre piece. This is the 15-foot access easement from Gilchrist, and then this is the piece of the back that contains the wetland system and the current pathway.
Chairman Bursch, is it true that the Conservation Commission unanimously supports the conveyance?
Yes. Yes. 7-0. We
Thank you.
unanimously support the conveyance.
Thank you.
And there are 4 members here that can also speak to that.
I'm gonna, is there anything else the board wants to say at the moment? I'm gonna open this up and take some public comment.
Sure, Mr. Chair, if I may, just follow up on some of the Conservation Commission information. In the last couple of weeks, I have hiked along the stone wall twice. I understand there's a little deviation where there's a swamp, and I actually walked through part of the swamp the second time, and it's not even that deep. Just to be facetious, went straight into it. And when we talk about this 20-foot path having no access, we actually went out as a very large group the other day and followed the path. The interesting thing is the proposed 15-foot easement also is not a cleared path, arguably less cleared. So when we talk about gaining this 15-foot easement, it's really just kind of like for like in terms of the conditions of the path. So that's one thing I wanted to say is to continue.
Is there a swamp on the other path?
There's a giant well or some sort of foundation you might leap. So I feel like it's an equal, that neither path is groomed, but either one could be. We certainly could groom our 20-foot path. One interesting thing about it is to talk about how it's neighborhood access. It's actually right across the street from the side entrance to the Woodlands, which is a dense place. So if you think of all the accessibility of people on foot to this path, to this access, when we talk about complete streets and connectivity, to get to Holman Street, you have to take probably a car, park there. For everybody that lives on Gilchrist, Valley View, Cliffview, all of the Woodlands, and even if you came up from Northfield, there's a lot of people that could enter the Lane property on foot at 161 Gilchrist.
So a big neighborhood.
I think there's a dense amount of people that can use the access. When we talk about protecting the mulpus and systems draining issues, conservation issues, when we convey this path, we pave the way literally for more houses to go in. And so when you talk about impervious surface or chemicals from yards and different things getting into the mulpus, in my simple estimation of the situation, the more you develop that parcel or the more houses there, the more you're going to put into the river, whether it's protected or not. So you could protect it's all downhill, so you could protect this, have this conservation, I guess, essentially call it this protected area. But if you have 2 extra lots and 2 extra driveways and everything that goes along with you know, property owners and their pollution, that's all going to go down into the river. So this concept of, I think, keeping the path protects the river because it decreases the amount of overall development on the parcels. The reason the path is so desired is that by owning it, it puts 2 contiguous parcels together and increases the amount of development. And I think from stormwater conservation and anything, if by giving away this path we enhance the amount of development, we enhance the amount of pollution that goes into the mulpus, whether we theoretically deem it protected or not, we are actually damaging it by allowing more houses to go in there by giving away a path. There was, when we looked at the map, the chairman said that there was no legal access on the other side of Jane Gallagher's driveway. He pointed out on one side there was legal access and on the other side there isn't. Well, yeah, there is legal access on the other side. It's the path. The path we're talking about is legal access from Gilchrist. Basically, if you follow it correctly, you almost end up exactly at the Peter Charpentier Memorial Bridge. So it's like Gilchrist to Bridge. It's beautiful. It's like you go along a historic stone wall that has some cattle fencing in it, because that's what it was. It was a cattle path, and I think they defaulted on their taxes and the town acquired it in 1937 or something like that. But you follow this stone wall and you land right at the mulpus at the site of a beautiful bridge that can take you across the river. I'm just really confused why.
And that's where the swamp is?
Well, I mean, I walked through half of it. I mean,
I'm just trying to.
Yes, but I mean, we even put bridges over rivers, and so if you do a lot, I spend a lot of time. My property abuts, you know, some of this land, and I spend a lot of time out there. There's all sorts of ways where you can put in little simple, almost like putting down a pallet of wood. Very simple ways to get over these impassable areas, and Lunenburg has done a lot of work to make, you know, trails accessible and walkable, and the small swamp we're dealing with certainly like many other places in town, you could easily overcome.
Construct something.
And so you go from Gilchrist Street, and with 20 feet, if you cleared it and used the entrance correctly, you could actually get a couple cars there in addition to the foot traffic. On Gilchrist Street, you follow the stone wall, you end up at the Peter Charpentier Memorial Bridge. It's a beautiful access. If we actually used it and made people in all these dense areas aware of it, we have a great path, and we decrease development, which in my mind simply conserves land more than any theoretical mapped off area. Okay.
And just a point of information, one of the negotiation points that we included in our discussion with, what we directed the town council to talk to the proponent was that we requested that they clear the 15-foot easement to the standards of the Conservation Commission so that there would be public access.
And they agreed to that.
Well, they agreed to that. Thank you.
And Mr.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, and I didn't know they agreed to that, so I don't know how we got that information, because we haven't discussed this since we were in executive session, so I wasn't aware that they took on our 3 stipulations, so I find it interesting that you know that that was accepted, because I didn't.
We asked for that in executive session, and had they not agreed to it,
I haven't heard back,
heard it.
and you said that it was agreed to, so I'm just surprised that I didn't know that, that's all. And then one last thing that came to mind is we talk about having this 2.33 acres protected by the town, but I think there's a lot of private owners that abut the Mulpus, and a private owner can also be a good steward of its own land. And anytime we take on more land, it's off the tax rolls. We talked an awful lot about that last year. I think if somebody owns 2.33 acres of land abutting the Mulpus, I know if I did, I certainly would take good care of my river. So the idea of the town needing to own it to protect it, I would feel confident, actually more confident, that a private owner would be a good steward of the land. So,
All right, I'm going to take.
You're saying that you think a private person would be a better steward than the Conservation Commission?
No, than the town. I don't necessarily think. I mean, the Mulpus.
The Conservation Commission is going to be in charge of it. I just am trying to understand.
Oh no, but the
what you're
Mulpus
saying.
is a long river. There's a lot of people that own private property abutting it, and I think that they probably also want to care for it.
Okay, that's different than what I heard, sorry. And also, when you're talking about tax rolls, if you put 2 more houses in, you're going to get more taxes.
Well, residentially speaking, if it's a 4-bedroom house and you get the students, that's...
All right, I think...
If I may, we're rehashing a lot of the conversation that was had at town meeting when this was approved in the first place. So I don't, myself, don't want the 5 of us to override what the 100 and some odd people who were there decided. That's why I'm sticking with the road we've been going down, personally. I understand the arguments to some degree. I still think the Conservation Commission has the best lens for looking at the situation here, and I trust that they made the right decision. So we're rehashing a lot of a conversation that's already been had with a much bigger audience.
With all due respect, we've never had a public hearing.
Please.
Okay.
I agree with you, Mr. McQuaid, but because there's been a lot of misinformation on this topic, and because a lot of people came out, I'm going to allow a few minutes. I'm going to ask people not to kind of cover ground that we've already covered. If you have something you really need to say, please feel free. And I think in the spirit of open government, which we always have been and intend to continue to be, I'm going to hear a few people's comments. But I agree. I think that this is a small sampling compared to the number of people that heard this at town meeting and had plenty of opportunity to talk about it. Would anybody like to, please?
Yes, please.
Jane Gallagher. So the map is not there, but I guess I would just point out the couple of acres that run along the brook that would be now conveyed are wetlands. So presumably would not be able to be developed upon anyways. I know that for myself, I had to allow for not only 100-foot flood zone, but a 200-foot flood zone when building my home behind the brook. So I would imagine that that would be the case for any of those homes there. So there would be that barrier that would be, protecting the mulpus there. So I don't know what we're, really saving, because it wouldn't be buildable anyways. It's wetlands. I just have one other point. I believe that any path can be made, whether it's next to my driveway or it's where the Harvey Lane is there. It's not impassable. It can be made into something that is passable, because I've woken up on a Saturday morning to a mini excavator on my property, unbeknownst to me. So, with someone putting a little bridge across some marshy land that, I guess the Conservation Commission felt a need to do that without telling me about it. So it happens. I don't know. I just wanted to bring those points forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up here, if you would.
Okay. I don't want to repeat what other, because that's not my question. My question is...
You have to give your name and address.
Peggy Proctor, 141 Gilchrist Street. Sorry. My concern, I certainly respect people who have expertise, of which I don't, and I don't want to sound ignorant. I'm trying to understand the process. So the town meeting, they voted with all those people to say that you guys ultimately would make this decision. The zoning board turned down the proposal that the builder had set forth. So far, so good?
Yep.
I guess my concern is, I never heard, I couldn't find the agenda item for your last meeting, whether it was executive session or not executive session. I feel like just because the town voted to let you guys make the decision, I think if people had had the opportunity via an agenda item to voice concern, then I think we probably could have avoided a lot of the miscommunication, I guess, because again, the last I knew, and it's not like I'm sitting on the website, although I might now because it's so nice, but I didn't see it. I didn't see it in the minutes. So that's my question, is the process, how it happened.
Okay. I'm going to make an attempt, all right?
All right, good.
I encourage the board to help me here. The town meeting did give the authority to the selectmen to proceed with this.
Yeah.
About 2 weeks ago, I think it was the 14th meeting, August 14th.
Yep.
We as an agenda item went into an executive session to talk about our negotiating strategy. It was not an open session. It was not put there to encourage people to come talk about it.
Right.
As part of the due process, once we have a agreement to look at that the town's attorney and the landowner's attorney have talked about, we have some steps to go through. In reference to Mrs. Adams' talk about procurement, there are things that we're going to learn about in a few minutes called a unique acquisition, and that's under Chapter 30B, and we're going to have to vote on that in public session. There's a disclosure of beneficial interest. We're going to have to discuss and vote on that, which is part of this public session. And ultimately, if we keep going on the path we're going, we're going to have a purchase and sale, which we will sign at a public meeting in front of everybody.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something, because I got the letter, and I'm like, okay, and then that was it. So thank you.
It went from, they were asking for a change to the bylaw by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they said no.
Okay.
So then they came back and they came in with a different plan. So
Okay.
that's what we had, which then matched what we were doing at town
Right,
meeting.
that's, I guess, where the disconnect is, because there was no notification, like, in other words, I got a letter stating what the plan was from the zoning board,
And
but
then
then
we didn't send you anything saying the plan had
Correct.
changed.
That's all.
Right.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
your clarification.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the approval at town meeting was more or less to approve us to enter into negotiations with the landowner, not to give us the approval to say yes or no, really.
Right.
Like, the town decided at the meeting to do it, and they gave us approval to negotiate the doing of it.
That's the way I understand it, yes.
Hi, Ken Chenis, 715 Page Street, and
I'm the guy with the excavator that was fixing the bridge. And I apologize that you weren't notified about that. But that actually brings me to my topic of discussion. I have nothing against the overall plan and the content of this. My primary concern was giving up owned land that we had the rights to do anything that we want on in exchange for an easement. And for that exact reason, here was an easement that was granted to the town to provide traffic out to the town forest. And because a bridge was damaged on it, I was asked to go repair the bridge. I went out to repair the bridge, and it created a little bit of chaos because I was doing something on the property that the owner of the property didn't think should be allowed to be done on the property. And so what I heard on 2 accounts now by Conservation is that the Conservation Commission in the town of Lunenburg is being granted total control of the easement property, meaning that the town has the right to do anything that they want on the land that they deem necessary on the land, regardless of what the homeowners of the land want done or not want done. Is that accurate in what you've come up with for the negotiations? Can you share or not share that?
I don't know the answer.
Do you have the easement language?
Because
part of the thing was that that was what was raised, and we said that there needs to be an easement that's consistent with what the Conservation Commission has. It doesn't mean that the person can't use the property.
No,
they can play ball on that property,
fine, but if all of a sudden, there is some flood that occurs and water cuts a channel through there and it determines that it ends up becoming a brook and we have to put a bridge in over it, I don't want to have a restriction that says, oh, there's absolutely no building allowed on this property. So
traditional easement law states that for the purposes of access, pass, and everything like, you can do everything to continue that access going across that. And so if you need to build a bridge subject to regulations such as the Conservation Commission, you still have the ability to do that.
All right, so the town does have total control of that easement as opposed to it just being granted for foot traffic only or something like that.
The language is exclusive use easement for the town.
Exclusive use is not control. That just means you can use it.
Yeah. Town council said does not mean fee interest in the property, meaning we don't.
You don't have don't have ownership, but an easement is an ownership interest in the property, and whatever you were saying. So part of it goes to what we said was that final purchase and sale agreement and the deed needs to be restrictive in what the easement says. So that was the other thing we said we needed. And the second part was, once we got to this point, the final easement language needed to be approved by us for that actual deed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't give up our rights on the easement to maintain that trail. And if the Conservation Commission decides that they want to put an additional trail in, I would think that they should have the right to be able to do that as well. So I just wanted to make sure that the easement was in our best interest as opposed to being highly restrictive of what we'd be able to do.
Great.
Thank you.
Richard Bursch, 308 Electric Ave. There is also a conservation restriction, I believe, that's going to be put on the property as well, that will restrict the use of the property to passive recreation only. So it's not that the town could go out and build a bocce court or basketball or tennis or anything of that nature. It's strictly to be used as it is today. Footpath, bicycle path. If we need to maintain the trails, we certainly, in the exclusive use easement, will have that allowance.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Kathy Mosca, 2 Valley Road. I had a few things. To address the idea that the town meeting gave the board ability to do this. At the time, the town was being told that they were going to get 7 acres of conservation land, and it made sense to go ahead and try to do a deal and see what would be in the best interest of the town. That never went through because it was shut down at the other meeting for different reasons. We're now talking about 2.5 acres of wetland, which is not going to be built on anyway. The idea that that path is worth $5,000 on the books, I'll pay $5,000 to keep it left as it is. That's ridiculous to say, oh, we're going to give it away town land that's owed for an easement in order to let 2 more houses be built. And I wonder, I haven't looked at the plans or anything, but is it an easement instead of saying, oh, you can have this 20 feet for this 20 feet in town land instead of an easement, because that wouldn't allow, again, the frontage for 7 houses. The neighborhood does not object to 5 houses at all, at all. It's the pushing this around and swapping this land to make frontage that does not exist into, now you can put in 2 more houses. The other 2 quick points that I wanted to make was the idea of conservation, clean water, and all of that. This path, this houses where they're going in, is a 1/4 mile uphill from Hickory Hills Lake. I'm not sure why conservation doesn't look at the fact that we're going from one small house that one person had lived in, or 2 part-time perhaps, to 7 large houses with 7 septic tanks. We don't have sewerage on that street. All of that is going to go the 1/4 mile downhill to the lake. And I think that conservation should be looking into what's the effect of that to the people who use that particular lake. And my last comment is that when it was said that there is no path, there's only a path there where the yard was mowed, just is not true. I have pictures, my husband has pictures on his phone tonight that could show you that there is a path. People do walk up there, and in the wintertime, it's used even much more for snowshoeing and the cross-country skis and so forth. This is not an unused piece of land. It is not worthless. If it's only $5,000, I'd pay twice that tonight for it. So please don't keep acting as if this was nothing. Putting in 7 houses instead of 5 is a big bonus for the sellers and for the contractors, I understand. But it's just not fair to sell out this land just to make more money for somebody. The 2.5 acres of wetland is going to be wetland anyway. Nobody's building on it, no matter who it belongs to. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Tom Alonso, 284 Lancaster Avenue. Somebody who's fairly process-minded, I just want to review a few of the things. First of all, I reviewed the town meeting video, and everything that was talked about here and everything that was shown on the map by the chair of the Conservation Commission was exactly what was talked about at town meeting. To the best of my recollection, I went through it. I have notes on everybody who spoke, and it was always talked about a land swap to protect the mulpus and to protect access to the trail and the cold water fishery that exists. It was always talked about that the land that we owned would be negotiated for an easement, which it looks like what has done. So from a town meeting member perspective, what is being proposed is exactly what was talked about then. And town meeting voted on it unanimously. Actually, they voted on it twice unanimously because the town moderator didn't ask the FinCom's opinion, and so they voted it again. To answer one of the selectmen's comments that the town meeting voted on it, so therefore you are, once the negotiations went through, that you are basically bound to vote for it, I would say is not true. They authorized the Board of Selectmen to make a decision, and like it or not, when you sit in one of those 5 seats, you get to make the decision on what you think is best for the town. Now again, I think it's perfectly legitimate to be swayed by the fact that it was a unanimous vote, but you're not bound by that because there are other things that come to light since then, and you should take those into consideration. So, I mean, I could see balances on both sides, and the balance on the conservation of the brook and the conservation of the species and the cold water fishery was talked about at town meeting, balanced against the additional lot or two that may be coming from it. So you can certainly discuss that. One thing I will comment on is if people think that necessarily people would be good stewards of conservation land and wetlands, I would say that when I was on the Board of Selectmen, and several of you were on there then, we had an owner who decided to go through their own wetlands, go through the town's wetlands and conservation land, and totally destroy it, and we had to pay, like $12,000 or $15,000 to repair it. So people aren't necessarily great stewards of their own property, so getting a deeded access to or deeded restriction of ownership on the 2.3 and the extension on the 4 plus certainly has much better enforcement capabilities than what an owner might do intentionally or unintentionally. So I leave it to you five, but I think it's your decision to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more, please.
Thank you once again. Evagrio Mosca, 2 Valley Road. I understand and appreciate that town meeting gave you the right and the power to make a decision. Town meeting trusted you. My disappointment is when I read the minutes from several weeks ago, to bring this to open meeting may have been a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. I'm disappointed you didn't trust us to have this in open meeting, that you felt that this would be a detriment. You're not looking at a lynch mob here. I think that this was a respectful, open hearing. I think had this happened prior to the executive session, it would have gone probably just like this, and you would have had a little more information than you had a couple of weeks ago. But I think we could have come away feeling like we had the open meeting. This conforms to open government, and we would have a better trust in town government. Thanks.
Thank you. Sure.
Hans Winthrop, 418 Newest Townsend Road. So I guess I just have a couple quick questions for you, and I don't know if you may have already addressed these, or I'm not sure. I'm coming late to the game. What happens if you don't do anything? So I know from my understanding is that town meeting gave you the authority to negotiate on behalf of the town. What happens if you do nothing? I mean, you can do that, correct? I mean, you could say yay or nay. In full disclosure, I'm on the Zoning Board of Appeals. This came to light, obviously, to me a few weeks ago when we decided to do nothing on the special permit application. The applicant was looking for 7 lots, and by right, he's allowed 5, I think, if that's still correct. I haven't seen the new plans, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the zoning board. I'm just saying that, I was there at the meeting, and we decided not to entertain the 7 lots, and it was because they wanted a reduction in the square footage of each lot. The question I have is, as I looked at it, no one's going to touch the wetlands. I mean, as the plan was presented to the zoning board back then, the lots didn't even come near Mulpus Brook. I don't know what the new lots look like now, but I think from my perspective as a citizen, and the land swap, and before they came to the board, I think one of the questions that they said to us is, well, we'll do it regardless whether you like it or not, because the town meeting gave us the authority to do so. And I don't think that's quite true. I think it's up to you guys as a board to look and say, does this make sense for the town of Lunenburg? One option is to take that 20-foot or 20-foot strip of land that we own and create a trail out of that, and where it crosses Mulpus Brook, it's come up with some kind of bridge to cross it. I just don't think, right now, as a matter of right, we're giving 2 building lots to a developer. We're getting some land, but I don't think anybody would be able to build on that anyways, and I don't think anybody would even go near that, just from a sheer cost perspective of where the houses would be off of Gilcrest. So, my idea to you is, why not just leave it as it is and, figure out something else? I don't necessarily say, I don't know how many townspeople voted on it or how many townspeople were there and voted on the warrant article. But, if you look at the statistics, I'm sure it was a small population that said, give you the go-ahead to do it. But there's nobody saying that you have to approve it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Were you here when Chairman Bursch read all that's going to happen if we don't do it?
Yes. Yes, okay. I did. And I like to look at plans. I have the plan that was presented, but this plan now has been, that was presented to the zoning board a few weeks ago. But that has changed, obviously, because we denied him the 7 building lots that he was looking for. So, quite honestly, what brought my attention to it the other day, last week, I was at the planning board, and just by happenstance, the developer came in, I think, looking for 7 A&R lots, which is approval not required. And the board, the planning board, tabled that until they had ownership of the property. So, I was thinking to myself, well, they came before us for 7. They said they could get 5. But then at the planning board, they said, they wanted 7 A&R lots. And I'm like, well, they didn't really give up anything. I was trying to figure out. So I haven't taken a look at the most recent plans, but I'm just trying to think, this board has the authority to say yay or nay. And I understand you have, the town gave you the authority at town meeting. That doesn't necessarily say you have to approve it. Thinking about it this way, you got five building lots now. They can't. I don't think anybody's going to do anything to Mulpus Brook. I understand the Conservation Commission's intent on trying to keep that, in perpetuity for the town, and I applaud them for that. But I think, giving away the property to a developer. They certainly came before the zoning board, and our feeling was that they didn't meet the requirements of the bylaw, and that's why we didn't give it to them. So that's all. I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you. One thing I have to say in response to the previous speaker, I certainly trust the citizens of this town. I work for the citizens of this town, and it troubles me that people are not understanding what I'm saying, so I'm going to try it one more time. When we went into executive session, it was not to be keeping anything from our citizens. I sold a used car last night. I listed it on Craigslist for $2,500. The guy came to the house and offered me $18,000. Okay? I had discussed with my girlfriend prior, let's take $2,000 at a minimum. I didn't want to tell him that. I wanted to know that when he came in. All right? But I would have trusted my neighbor not to tell another neighbor, and that's what we have here. When we went into executive session, sir, we were saying we're doing this because we have some negotiation criteria. If he clears the land, if he gives us this particular corner, we think we can negotiate something. If he doesn't give us that, maybe we don't think we have a deal. That's the purpose of executive session. The beneficial interest is the beneficial interest of our negotiation, not the beneficial interest to the town on whether the land acquisition is a good deal or not. So just on that minor point, I just want to be real clear on why all of this is open, and it will continue to be open with the exception of the few times when executive session is appropriate. Okay, I'll do one more. Well, I'm only going to do one. If you're going to give up your seat, that's fine with me. Up here, please.
Jack? No, you have
up here. Yeah, but you still have to do. We're on TV.
Jack, you have to talk up here.
Mr. Chairman, can I have permission to speak? Mr. Rabbit. Thank you. Make it brief. Very brief. Very brief. Thank you.
just like to share with you some of the deliberations that went on with regard to our unanimous approval.
Could you identify yourself? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. John Rabbit, 314 Townsend Harbor Road, better known as Jack. And then we can start laughing. We had gone through this deliberation process. We recognize that this piece of property, while that is correct, there's a couple of acres of swamp, but there's a hydrologic connection from the other 5 acres that are feeding it. We look at that as critical to maintaining the essential essence of that cold water creek. And I'd like to point out 2 pieces. In a similar incident at Hickory and within Hickory Hills, there was a piece of property that the Hickory Hills had agreed to purchase approximately $100,000 to buy this just to protect that hydrologic connection. And when we had the voters meeting, about approximately 200 residents showed up, and it was nearly unanimous that we would spend the $200,000 out of our pockets to protect that. Same time, or a bit earlier, at our town meeting, the residents unanimously or near unanimously agreed to protect that connection. Protecting that area is paramount to allowing us to have an extra 5 acres of permeable land that'll continue to clean that water and to provide a good, strong basin water delivery into the basin. To lose that would be absolutely crazy. So if we're losing a strip, but we're gaining another 5 acres of permeable land, and we're not disturbing that connection, that is almost, in my mind, a no-brainer, especially where we're now allowing another access. We've got to protect that piece in order to maintain the integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we have some business to transact here along the path.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before we
Sure.
Deviate, in regards to the Hickory Hills land project, I was involved in that, and it was $100,000 for 17 acres, and it was to purchase it and create conservation land and to halt any development. I see no parallel to this in which this transaction goes from 5 lots to 7, where we're actually enhancing development. I don't think it's a good example, because what protects the river and everything more than anything is to decrease overall development. In our land swap transaction, we enhance the amount of overall development. In the Hickory Hills project, it was to prevent any development. The land is basically and will be untouched. That is not the case for what we're discussing now. Nothing will be untouched. The historic stone wall has already been knocked down in one area, not sure by who, because it's still owned by the town. And so the destruction of the land has already happened and will happen. It's just the amount we're going to allow by whether or not we have our path. So that doesn't seem, that I just wanted to point that out because I was involved in the Hickory Hills project quite a bit. In terms, one thing I just wanted to say before we go into the bookkeeping part of this letter here for the conveyance is I'm not up to speed with whether or not the landowner has accepted the conditions. And so I feel like just as a board, we're missing a part of a meeting. You said earlier that they have accepted the conditions, and one of which was to clear the path. And I'm totally missing the part of open government where somehow I have no idea any of that information. And I feel like I've missed some sort of update and am not in the loop. And when I asked questions last week and I saw town council after a planning board meeting, I said, why didn't you respond to my question? And his answer was, I needed to close the loop with the town manager before I got back to you. So I just feel bad I'm not in the loop. That's not open government.
So what's the...
Where are the updates to accepted conditions? I mean, we should all know where we
What's the
stand.
procedural part that we need to do next before we even get... My understanding is that we're going to see the deed before we sign it and approve it. And because have we executed a purchase and sale agreement yet? No, we haven't. All right. So the purchase and sale agreement will have the proposed easement in there covering the various things that we need to do and the other conditions, and the deed, we will see that before it's executed. So we now have procurement requirements?
Correct.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I thought the discussion would include the end result of what was discussed in executive session. So let me quickly review that. We have discussed the 2.3 acres that the town would acquire, approximately 5-acre permanent conservation restriction on that parcel, with a 20-foot permanent exclusive use easement where the trail exists. The seller did agree to clearing that permanent easement where the trail exists, and the permanent easement along Valley Road, which is Jane Gallagher's
Correct,
driveway.
and Jamie knew that information, and I don't know how it gets disseminated to the entire board.
It did not get disseminated.
It did not.
Okay, right.
Right now, Jamie just asked the town manager what was going on, and that's when she said, and then so he just announced what she just said.
Earlier, he answered a resident that the seller, that the purchaser did agree to clear the path. I'm just saying, in open government, we should all have known that.
That's what I just got.
From the town manager, and that's what she just told.
We asked in executive session for certain things.
And we haven't
May I
followed
finish,
up.
please? We asked in executive session for certain things. The next step is for us to see the actual written purchase and sale agreement, which none of us have seen. I asked the town manager, did he agree to the clearing? And she said yes, which I stated out loud in an open meeting that you were at.
So just to clarify one other thing, this is, along this whole process, it's been described, people refer it to as a land swap. It's not a land swap. It's two separate processes, acquisition and a disposition of property, and we're following two separate processes for that, as well as two separate purchase and sale agreements would be the end result. For the acquisition portion of 171 Gilchrist Street, the published notice must include a determination of uniqueness and reasons for the determination, the names of the parties with a beneficial interest in the property, the location and size of the property, and the proposed purchase price or rental terms. And this is per procurement law. So, and the disclosure that's referenced would be signed by the seller, so not the board. It's for the seller to sign. And he's disclosing if he has any beneficial interest. And I assume this comes down to, say, a board member was the purchaser of the property. So it's disclosing that interest. And DCAM is Division of Capital Asset Management for that anachronism. So what is in the board's packet tonight is suggested wording from town council. The board can make whatever motion they want to, but it would need to include that information.
So for the purposes of discussion, I will move that the board determines that advertising by soliciting proposals for the acquisition of real property will not benefit its interest as regards the acquisition of a portion of 171 Gilchrist Street because of the unique qualities and location of that property. The board specifically determines that 161 Gilchrist Street is situated adjacent to existing conservation land presently owned by the town of Lunenburg, that acquisition of a portion of 161 Gilchrist Street 171 Gilchrist Street in fee and of an easement in an additional portion of it will expand the area of contiguous conservation land to which Lunenburg residents will have use and enjoyment, and that part of what is to be acquired is an access easement for pedestrian passage from the adjacent public way.
Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay, so this is what we need to say. For what purpose?
For the acquisition of that portion of land on 171, which would then get put into the central register for 30 days. And that has to happen before the board would sign a purchase and sale agreement.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Sure.
Who are we acquiring 171 Gilchrist Street from?
From the Kevin Hill, I believe.
He doesn't own it?
No,
He doesn't own it
It
yet?
would be,
So
it would
is
be
it-
into the.
So I'm confused by it.
So we're acquiring a property, not, You were saying something had to have the ownership in?
Solsix, I think.
Sozik?
Yeah, Solsix.
Yeah, I don't know if we can acquire property from someone who doesn't own it, so I'm not sure if we're ready for this step.
Well, the question becomes for the town manager, do we have to have the owner's name here, or is identifying the property by the address sufficient? Because you.
This is a suggested wording from town council, so I
Okay.
think this would be adequate.
I think it's the beneficial interest for the disposition requires the name.
So just for the sake of understanding, as this goes through the procurement process, we're acquiring this from the current owner. Because I don't think we can sign something here to acquire something from somebody who does not have it.
Right.
So we're acquiring it from the Soziks.
But no acquisition is actually taking place until a purchase and sale is signed.
So this is a determination so that this can get put into the central register. This is not actually acquiring the property.
Right.
The purchase and sale agreement will have the town's name as purchaser and the Sozik's property owner as seller when we get to that point. And the deed will as well.
And that'll all be done in public session.
Right. Because I don't believe we're negotiating anything more.
No.
So this is not a final decision to go forward or not, it's just the next step.
As I understand it, it's a good faith that we're headed towards the next step. You know, you wouldn't put it in the central register and ask all these things to happen if you weren't intending to go there. But until we read the P&S and agree with all its terms, it's not a final decision.
The P&S is when the contract is effectively happens. The deed is the execution of the purchase and sale agreement. So we get to say yes or no when we see the purchase and sale agreement.
And in good faith, Kevin Hill, who's seeking this, is depending on these dates in the purchase and sale to then file an A&R with the planning board. So these dates have been set out. So if the board is wishing to pursue a different avenue, I think that
we should let them know.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask Heather a question, more of a procedural thing that I'm not sure the answer to. In terms of now, we've separated this swap, and in all fairness, I've done a lot of emailing behind the scenes and worked on getting it not called a swap. But as two separate transactions, as the law requires, conveyance and acquisition, what comes first? Do we convey the land and then acquire, or do we acquire and then convey?
So we would execute two purchase and sale agreements at exactly the same time. Reality, you're going to do one after the other, and the deeds would be executed at the same time, and then they'd be recorded one after the other.
So then we'd be acquiring from the Sozik, but conveying to Kevin Hill?
No, we would, my understanding probably, and it becomes the thing, is that it depends on when the Soziks are selling the property, but if we were to do all this today, we would acquire from the Soziks and sell to the Soziks. Because I believe this is all one deal as far as the whole thing happening, because if we just did acquisition without disposition, they're not going to like it. And the acquisition is they're not going to deed it to us unless they know we're going to deed to them. So
it has to be done simultaneously.
It's effectively simultaneously.
And so we're not negotiating with Kevin Hill because he doesn't own the property?
He has an interest in the property acting on behalf of the owners, I believe. I don't know if they've got a power of attorney or not, but he's involved.
So I still don't completely understand how it works, but I'll do some learning.
So we've had a motion and it's been seconded. Are we ready to vote?
If the discussion's finished,
I guess I don't understand who we're acquiring it from, and I feel like that should be very clearly defined.
It doesn't need to be in this part because this is part of the notice that has to go in the central register. You don't have to name the person's name in the acquisition advertising. You name the property.
But the Soziks are aware that we're
support
registering their land.
Well, we don't register the land. We register our notice to acquire. It's not a registry of deeds, it's a registry of contract notices to the world.
And I believe this disclosure of beneficial interest form has to be filed by whoever the other side of the process is.
So this is the only thing we have before us tonight.
Yeah, well,
is
we
the
don't have to do that. It's
Right.
whoever the other side is has to do that. Okay, so we ready for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Opposed? Okay, 4-1. We got something to sign?
I will have to print that out at the
Okay.
end of the meeting.
All right, because there's something in here that has
Yes.
places for signatures. Okay, fair enough. All right, moving on.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you very much. If we're going to keep working. Discussion about project list for state-funded earmarks. I believe that was your request, Phyllis, but the town manager is going to lead this.
Yeah, great.
We got anything in here or just talk about it?
I guess
Nope, it was an
as a
action item.
first-
No, I'm sorry. Nope. There's nothing in the packet. This was an action item that Selectman Luck asked to be put on the agenda.
Okay.
I guess I would like to know what the categories are that you, for state-funded earmarks, what kinds of things should we be considering?
The ones that came up this year were economic development, capital facilities, and environmental.
And what do they mean by environmental?
That's,
Like,
to
for
do a little
example-
more research to see what types of projects were ultimately submitted as part of that.
Okay, but, you know, because like, I think of when I drive by the town beach and there's just no shade on the darn thing, I would love some kind of a cabana or something so that kids could get out of the sun for a short while. So is that an environmental thing? You know what I mean?
That would probably be under recreation, which there may be money for recreation if
Right.
it's shovel-ready as well.
So we should probably think about what are the
Categories.
categories
Yeah.
and where could we put things in, and how do we reach out to people to find out, you know, what do you think is important?
What, I'm going to sort of channel you.
Okay.
So some of these things would be in the capital budget process. Some of the things would be out. So the cabana at the beach would probably never be asked for because they probably would never get a chance to do it because we have all these other things they know they need to do. So I think this is an opportunity to say there's going to be shovel-ready capital planning items that we've gone through a capital planning process. And we want to have those ready to go whenever we have the list, but we also want to have the list of other things like that idea that's a creative idea that might not make it through the process. Did I channel you right?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think we can look at all of our wish lists when we do our budget and say, if someone comes to us with a grant opportunity or a campaign promise or an earmark or anything else, and it's just, I want to say I helped Lunenburg, I would love to go to our own list of whatever the highest priority is and have him pay for it or her pay for it instead of us.
Exactly.
On the other hand, if they say, you know, it's a special grant process that only does recreation, do we have a little side list that says, boy, the shade thing would fit, and it doesn't make our list?
Exactly, because I think
Right.
there are things that are your wish list, but it's just never going to make it in the capital plan.
Yep.
Right.
So, if Senator Train gets reelected and keeps coming and asking us.
And it's also side, I mean, I think this is a great topic for a workshop, but I think there are also side things. If it's short money,
Yeah.
you know, if somebody says, I got an opportunity, but it's only for 10 grand, there may be some things on the capital planning list that never made the list because they were so small that we could take out.
Right. It's kind of like, I don't know, just, you know, opening up our ideas and going, you know, what would we, you know, it's a wish list, you know.
And my suggestion would be is that we task the town manager and the capital planning committee that every time we hear something, oh, that would be a good grant opportunity. So,
Right.
so when we asked the land use director about the stormwater permit, well, what are the things that we might want to do is, well, which thing we may want to have. All right, we should have those ready that we may or may not go to the capital planning, and let's have those ready too. So every time we have it, just sort of like, what's the list of additional items? And maybe the capital planning can actually have I don't want to necessarily add more work, but I will, of saying what are the things that will never reach to that level, but would be nice to have.
Yeah, we're going to have, the only thing, we've done a very good job, the department heads have done a very good job of only presenting things they really need.
Right.
Because they know money's tight.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to somehow explain to them if they have a wish list category to themselves, put it on the side.
Right.
So we're not trying to disseminate what's important to them or not.
Yeah. Well, and that would help during grant process, because there's sometimes a grant will come across, and not just a earmark in the legislation, but an actual grant saying, here's a new grant thing somebody came up with, a private funder, I'm going to give you $10,000 to do X, Y, or Z. And if we've got that list already, then it wouldn't be the capital planning items.
Right.
I think brainstorming will help. There's been a couple different lists, and one of them had capital improvement items and some money for Turkey Hill, et cetera. And one of the things I've noticed this week is, our new primary school doesn't have any air control or air conditioning, the 2005 school, and Turkey Hill doesn't, and you can't even put window units there. And I know there's a classmate of my children who we talk about ADA compliance and whatnot, but he has a heart condition that is temperature sensitive, which is in a way, an ADA compliance issue. Turkey Hill windows can't take on a window unit, and that's how they accommodated children with, respiratory needs and whatnot in the Lunenburg Primary School. So we have a situation where, if a capital thing comes up, we could put funding into HVAC of Lunenburg Primary School and get all the window units out, probably save money on electricity. And so when you see capital items go through, I don't know,
It's been there.
without brainstorming. No, but I mean, these are things that, like this week, they took in the first week, last week, they took students from Turkey Hill into the middle high school because the second floor air quality was low. And so that came to my mind when we're having the discussion. So I think brainstorming's good.
Good.
Unless it's my brain.
I just want to talk to reality for a second, though. I think this is good work, and I think that we should have these lists and have them ready. But I know sometimes reality says there's a senator on the phone, and he's hot to spend money, and he needs an answer in 10 minutes.
Yes.
And getting money into the town for something that we need but we hadn't prioritized yet is not a bad thing. We could always go back and backfill, the money we had intended to spend that, for that on something else. So it's a good thing if someone wants to give us back our taxpayer money to this town rather than some other town, right?
No, I agree.
Okay. But I think that is something that we should keep thinking about in budget time, in capital planning time. I think Mrs. Adams' point is, the capital planning requests that come out of the school are very specific, but maybe they should be doing the same process, that are what is their wish list, that doesn't rise to the town's capital plan, but would be great to have if someone had some dough for them. Especially if it was a grant that was education-based. Maybe that's, where we wouldn't have an opportunity to look for it.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Great.
So we put that on the list of workshops and figure out when we can get to it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Super. Is that okay, Phyllis?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Number 3, discussion about holding selectmen meetings in public buildings other than town hall. That's Mrs. Adams's request.
Yes. And so I started commenting about this as a citizen, public commenting. When we talk about our town buildings, and we talk about town hall specifically, one, we're on the second floor. We only have a lift here. We have extension cords that somebody could easily trip over. The bathroom's not ADA compliant. The front entrance is certainly not ADA compliant. And we've held workshops, not since I've been a selectman, but I went to several meetings, like the Complete Streets workshop at the middle high school. And when you read through the minutes prior to building the middle high school, one thing they talked about is it like being a community use building, and they've done a good job sharing the gym. There's adult fitness programs there. And so as we sit here each Tuesday night, there typically on a Tuesday night, more than one empty collaborative room in that building. Also, library, their meeting rooms are heavily used, but also vacant usually on a Tuesday night is a beautiful room in the Eagle House. So what made me think of these buildings is that we already own them. These are buildings that, like the new middle high school, are 100% ADA compliant. You have good, safe handicap parking. You have the push-button door entry, which I think is essential for access for people in a wheelchair or walkers and whatnot. And not only that, but you also have better technology. And this in and of itself is a bit of a hazard to have people walking through all of this. So we have smart boards. These collaborative rooms are clean, bright, available. I don't know why we wouldn't maybe consider, especially with ADA compliance, having a lot of legality to it with the Massachusetts Office of Disability, and really starting to look at whether or not towns are complying. For free, we can provide more accessible meetings with better parking. And I was wondering if we could give it a shot. Also of note, we've researched that the internet speed there can do live broadcast, and we do have a TriCaster 455, which is a live broadcast unit. So even in absence of moving this, which we certainly, I think, could relocate these systems, we can live broadcast with what we currently own and the internet we currently have.
You mentioned the Eagle House. How's their technology?
I don't know if we've tested. I know when I public commented with that as a question as a citizen, that came up, and I don't think we've followed through. But the good news is we know the high school would work. The Eagle House might work, and I think the Eagle House would be an excellent location where we've all actually had a selectmen meeting there. And I was there as a citizen, where there was a table in the front and then all the chairs were put out as they are here. So I think we have a real opportunity to improve ADA compliance and not use this as our space. And I think that would be heading in the direction that the state is looking for with compliance to the laws.
Ms. Adams, are you suggesting we just move the selectmen's meetings or all of the meetings?
I think I would encourage all meetings to go to an accessible location, and there are multiple collaborative rooms there, but I've had this conversation with someone who in their town, when you think of a classroom in a school, especially in the new school where they all have smart technology, a smaller group like a standard size conservation commission meeting, or charter review committee meetings, those are so widely attended, they could be held in a classroom. And again, you'd be putting the meeting someplace that was completely safe, accessible, with the right technology, using buildings we already have. So I think the goal could be all meetings, but certainly the widest attended ones could be looked at first.
So my first concern is the fact that this room is set up as a studio. While we have the ability to broadcast from those other rooms, they're not set up as a studio. They don't have the multiple camera points, the sound system. Go beyond the cable access to haul equipment to each one of those locations and chase us down. And I feel you'll lose production value in that and add workload to them is one obstacle.
Well, we were going to potentially convey this building, and I think at that point we would have to be identifying with another way to live broadcast from an alternative location. And so if this building wasn't a part of our ownership anymore, we would certainly seek a solution for taping elsewhere. I think it would actually benefit everyone if we set up some broadcast circumstances at the school. I think it could be very widely used to have live broadcast capability at our $72 million school. I feel like it goes hand in hand and would be a benefit to everyone. I just don't see this as the future of accessibility here.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. It's not the future.
Let's record that. He agrees with you right now. That's really good.
I want to make...
Can record the butt that's about to come.
I want to make sure this is not a patch. I've been beating the accessibility drum for a lot longer than you've been involved. And I want a real long-term solution, not a patch to the solution that we get comfortable with and lose sight of the real goal, which is a permanent, accessible town hall that is meeting space, but also office space where people can go to the clerk and the treasurer and everyone else that they need to see. Because as soon as we start losing sight and, you know, incrementally putting patches on things, we lose the need for the real solution.
If I may respond to the concept of a patch, for somebody who finds this current room not very accessible, we could have our next meeting on September 11th at a more accessible space. I would feel like I would be insulting anybody with a disability to say that we have an option. I mean, the honest answer is we could permanently use that collaborative space for our meetings, and using a space redundantly will save a lot of money for the town in the long term, because really the school by day is a school and by night it's mostly vacant other than the gym. And the school committee does use the collaborative rooms on their nights, which is Wednesdays. But if we look for having meetings and having redundant use, I mean, we have a $72 million school with empty, they're called collaborative meeting rooms. They're empty collaborative, and we've used them, and it's worked well. 100% smart technology and everything. The redundant use of that space saves money. To create a new space to have meetings when we already have space, I don't see a situation in terms of calling it a patch. I don't see a situation where we'd want to unpatch that and say, hey, you know what, let's re-vacate these nice rooms and go spend money to make new ones somewhere else when we already have them.
I've made some notes as well. Number one, I think public access includes all municipal functions, not just meetings. I think we have to think about people that are coming for permits, licenses, dog licenses, etc. We do have a plan, and it's to pursue a move of the municipal offices to the Passios. We're going to hear a conceptual design at next week's workshop for that. I would prefer that we keep a high priority on that plan. We could phase that plan in if we agree to, and ensure that meeting space and PAC facilities are in the first phase, if you will.
So you could move that first, and so we...
Right.
That's interesting.
I think that the quality of the television broadcast, like Mr. McQuaid said, is also a major consideration for those unable to attend meetings, like the disabled. If we go with a mobile broadcast, we lose some of the quality. We lose multiple cameras. We lose some of the audio capabilities. We certainly lose. We are taking a TV picture of a screen as opposed to having it done through the control room. I also think that the scheduling of meeting space for multiple committees and PAC coverage should best be done by the town and not by other organizations whose main purpose isn't municipal government. Their purposes are schools and libraries and education and library stuff. And then finally, I think that a regular schedule and a regular location allows for planning and clarity when people want to attend our meetings.
I would say that the town manager has stated that it's important to revitalize the American with Disabilities Committee, and I would suggest that there be one of their tasks is to what can be done to make sure that the current accessibility options for this building, which includes the ramp that I know there's been some work done or will be done on that, and that the lift is suitably repaired and maintained so that nobody gets trapped and that it's usable, that will be something that we can use during the time period by which we finalize the decision on this building and what we're going to do with the next process for town offices. So I don't support moving our meetings at this point.
And I would point out that it's not our building to make the decision without asking the school to begin with, so it's a little bit of a process there anyways. I'm not sure, I don't want to speak for them either way, if they want the traffic in their building or not, but it's not a selectman controlled building, so we can't unilaterally make that decision.
I mean, this building is a $72 million building, and it is a school, and I put that first. I have 4 children in the school system, and I understand that, but there's a lot of people in town who pay into all this and pay into taxes, and they don't utilize the school system. And so looking at the building as a redundant space where we can host, and a lot of towns use schools for meetings, where we can host meetings in a room that's currently empty. And even if we have a long-term plan to, drop, $10, $20 million on TCP so we can be burdened with 55,000 square foot of long-term cost, that we may not need. I think in the meantime, before we go and ask town meeting for $20 million to renovate a old school that, oddly enough, every single doorway in the TC Passios building is not ADA compliant, just sort of interesting. But we have a space where we could, and we have, as selectmen, you have held meetings in this place to act like we can't use the school when we already have. I just don't understand why we wouldn't try to bring compliance, even if it's in a goal to use another building in the future. I don't know why we would continue to use a space like this and not consider using a beautiful, right now, the collaborative meeting room at the middle high school is completely empty. It has handicap parking, it has a push-button entry, and it has ADA compliant bathrooms. It has everything that is required, and even though I agree that doesn't solve the problem for somebody coming into this building to pay taxes, the good news on that too is with all the e-permitting that we're rolling out, people's needs for these other offices are going to decline dramatically, and in the meantime we can easily look to bring better compliance to these spaces. But I don't know why we wouldn't. I went with Heather to an ADA compliance meeting at the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, and they're really trying to have people lay out and map out plans on how they can improve and when they're going to improve it. And how we can improve accessibility to meetings is by having it at a currently vacant ADA compliant space. And when we can do that is immediate. That's the best outcome. There's no cost and no time associated with improving this, and we're really supposed to be doing that. So I find it just completely floors me that we would continue to ask people to use a rickety lift or to come open these heavy doors that I can barely open when I've got a few things in my hands. We have everything we need currently empty, and it's free and it's available and it's immediate, and I'm sorry to anybody with a disability that we could be so insensitive to ignore such a good opportunity.
And I personally think I'm offended that you're doing scare tactics on what the cost and size of the Passios Elementary School is going to be. We don't know what it is yet. Let's just talk about the issues that are before us, and let's not get into what it may cost and what it may be the size. We don't know that yet.
And the issue is ADA compliance to meetings, and we can bring that solution. That's the point of the agenda.
Again, you said no cost and no issue. You need to relocate the studio to the school, which is not where we want it to live. So that is a cost to go put a patch on something that's temporary.
Sounds less expensive than a multi-million-dollar town hall. But
again, we've been going down a path of developing a plan for a long-term solution. I would like to proceed with the plan that we're going down and make sure we, again, have all the information, which I know you like to request, all the information, have all the information before us before we make a long-term decision.
in the short term, we won't help comply with ADA compliance.
I think if I just may make a point on that, we are not incompliant in those areas. We do have a handicap access ramp. It was identified that it needs one more handrail on that ramp in the property condition assessment that Vertex did last February. They identified approximately $3,000 worth of ADA compliance issues, which are, I think, easily performed. We can put it was the handrail and one other item in the report. The Ritter building had approximately $1,700 worth of ADA.
So that's all we need to spend to get these two buildings?
No, those are still patches in their own right.
Correct.
Because that's not full compliance, that's just
It's
compliant.
not saying we're going
It's to get us out of violation.
So we could do full compliance at the high school?
Yeah.
We could do full compliance at the Passios as well.
No,
and
I'm
it
just
would be a
talking
more
about
permanent
an
solution.
immediate need.
But just the point was that, we do have accessibility to this building. The people who need a ramp have the ramp to use. The bathrooms on the first floor are ADA compliant. This one will be renovated because if you look at the condition of this bathroom, not only for accessibility, it's in very poor condition. So it needs to be done regardless. And I have spoken to the DPW director about making it ADA compliant. But we can work on those small issues like cords and stuff. That's something.
So then these buildings have hope.
No. Again.
It's just making them more accessible for the interim times where we're at a facility that is fully.
Ms. Adams, I'm a little offended that you're appealing to the disabilities of individuals to further your political agenda of where you want to see town hall in town. You don't think you're leveraging that right now?
I went to a meeting on ADA compliance from the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. I told Heather that I wanted to join the committee she's forming, and this is a topic that matters to me. I have a background in healthcare. I have my doctor of pharmacy. For you to imply that this isn't something I'm just floored. I can't even.
You've been trying to twist our words since the conversation started. Ms. Adams, I care very much about accessibility. I've been pushing for it for many, many years. I'm an architect. I deal with it on a daily basis. I care very much about accessibility. I don't like the way you've turned the conversation into oh, we could do it over here. Oh, you're saying these buildings are fine. It's a real issue. It's not something to be twisted. We need to make sure we have a long-term, real solution that accommodates all people in all the ways they need to access government.
No motion before us.
Okay. Does anybody want to put a motion before us, or do we move on?
Move on.
I'd move on.
Okay. We have a workshop next week, and hopefully that'll help us flush out some of the issues. Next item is a drainage easement for Matson Homes at 63 Prospect Street.
Okay. This item will be tabled until the September 18th meeting. There's some language changes that the town council wants to see.
And it's actually drainage easement for the town.
Correct.
That's
Yes.
across their property.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just to
for-
explain a little bit, it does not require town meeting vote. It only requires a selectman to vote at a meeting for this drainage easement.
Okay.
Yes.
An easement for Hickory Hills Lake Association for work to be done on the Hickory Hills Dam. I believe we've discussed this before, just from the point of view of several of us live on Hickory Hills. I think we've addressed the issue of potential conflict of interest, and I personally don't believe I have a conflict of interest in this issue.
Nor do I.
Hear from the Hickory Hills later.
Please.
Thank you.
You've hung in here this long.
Yeah, I know it. I hang through it. John Fortune, 50 Hemlock Drive. I'm the representative for Hickory Hills Landowners Incorporated for the dam overtopping project this has been part of. So we have worked with Attorney Costa through all that, got the easement together. We've reviewed it. Our attorneys reviewed it. We're happy with where we are today. We've provided all the documentation and the plans that he has asked for. So we think we're ready for it to go forward and be signed. And I think that's where, working through Heather, you believe we're in the same place.
Yes. Yep. These have been
Okay. And we
drafted and reviewed.
And they're in the package, and we've solved all the title issues and whatever there
Yes, there was one reference to Townsend Harbor Road, but it's at the grantee's risk that it's not there.
Yep.
So I note that this follows what town meeting approved. You had a presentation here as well as town meeting, and that the easement is to provide access on town property so that you can access and actually install the overtopping protection on your property, the lake's property, as well as the town's, and that you have the right to install it and future maintenance of it at your own cost, not you personally, but the Lake Owners Association. Any damage, you're going to repair it. Makes sense to me.
Yep, so we maintain it, repair it, install it, pay for all of it, et cetera.
I would make a motion that we sign the grant of easement as submitted to us.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just like to mention, I know you mentioned that 3 of us are from Hickory Hills, but I am as well, and I don't feel that I'm affected by it in any way, other than I'm surprised that they started it without the easement.
I'm also a resident, and that's why I deferred to let Phyllis second it before I... Anyway.
Okay, fine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, John.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks. We'll pick it up from you.
Yes.
Okay. That way we can get our signatures on it as well.
And there will be the plan will need to be recorded
Yes.
with those as well.
So I don't know if we do it or you do it. Doesn't matter if you want us to do it.
Yes. Yep, I think it's, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We don't have any minutes. We do have warrants. Accounts payable in the amount of $582,961.95. Payroll in the amount of $757,462.80. And accounts payable in the amount of $382,564.22. Any action file issues?
You know, I have one. When the skate park folks were here, they wanted to know what they're going to need to do and what we're going to be asking for as they're planning the skate park. You know, one thing I thought about was they're going to have people who want to provide in-kind services sign a contract. I'd love our town council to give that contract the thumbs up to make sure the town has every protection it needs, because they're talking about a lot of
Doing the work
value
on our property.
done with in-kind. That's just one thing I thought of, and so we should, you know, in fairness to them, we should think about, okay, what does the town need from them before they can break ground, and so that we're not every week coming up with a different thing, trying to, you know, talk to town council and just put something together of what exactly we'll need.
Okay.
That's going to be a standing agenda item every month too with the skate, they're going to come in once a month.
Right,
at the end
right.
As
Right.
well, so.
But I'll just a couple companies I work for, they make sure that every subcontractor that works on the job has a certificate of insurance and a list of criteria they need to meet, that they just make everybody sign or provide.
You know, and I'm sure that, you know, they've got a lawyer, so they'll be doing a lot of things, but I think we just have to dot our i's and cross our t's.
It's a big enough project that it's going to be.
Yeah, we have to protect the town.
I just have one. I guess I was elected to represent Subregion 3 in the...
Congratulations.
You know, I think I was the only one available at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays. But I now have to list a designee, and if it pleases the board, I'd like to work with the town manager to either list it as herself or the DPW director, just so that we have a designee.
Makes sense.
Okay. Any earth-shaking committee or department reports? Or can we?
I went to the planning board meeting. They had a public hearing for Settlers Solar, so there'll be more to come on that, sort of adaptations to what was originally happening.
They continued
ongoing.
that, so.
Sure.
Right. Okay, our upcoming meeting, September 11th, we have our town facilities workshop, and then we will meet September 18th. I'm sorry?
Have we not set up something for FinCom? I was thinking
Yeah, I think
somehow it was
don't we have a
this
joint
week.
meeting with them this Thursday?
That came back and forth. I thought the last message was that it didn't work.
No.
So there's
Oh, okay.
nothing scheduled.
Didn't
yet.
work, okay.
I think you're probably looking at October.
It asked for maybe a Tuesday. What's the latest one?
Okay, I just, I had.
All right, so the one that was,
last
yeah, I
time
had
I heard it was
Thursday, okay.
Nothing scheduled.
Okay, that's good.
All right, great.
All right. And then we meet the 18th and the 2nd, and special town meeting, just as a reminder, is on the 13th of November.
Okay.
Is there any public comment from the public? Is there any public comment from the board?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night.